The world outside is fading into a quiet, soft stillness. The hustle of the modern day is drifting away, leaving behind only the gentle rhythm of your breath. Tonight we are stepping back in time, crossing the threshold of a grand Victorian mansion, nestled deep within the rolling hills of 19th century Britain. As the night deepens, let your mind drift into the forgotten corridors of history. To the outside world, this mansion is a monument of elegance and prestige. Its towering stone walls, magnificent clean-cut lawns, and glowing stained glass windows speak of immense wealth and effortless luxury. But beneath the polished surface of this grand social life lies a vast, intricate, and silent world. It is a world powered not by machines, but by the relentless, quiet labour of dozens of human hands. These were the domestic servants, the cooks, the housemaids, the footmen, and the scullery maids who lived and worked entirely in the shadows of the aristocracy. Imagine waking up when the world is still wrapped in pitch-black darkness, long before the master and mistress of the house open their eyes, and long before the first golden rays of the sun touch the horizon. A secret life begins downstairs. While the family sleeps soundly beneath thick velvet blankets, the servants are already moving like ghosts through the cold, echoing stone hallways. There is no sound except the soft rustle of heavy cotton dresses, the rhythmic sweep of a broom, and the crackle of a newly lit fire. They are the invisible gears of a massive clockwork home, ensuring that everything appears flawless, effortless, and magical by the time the household awakens. To understand the true reality of Victorian life, we must look past the glittering ballroom parties and the lavish five-course dinners. We must look at the strict, unyielding structure that governed the lives of those who made it all possible. Every single movement, every hour of the day, and every social interaction within these walls was dictated by a complex hierarchy. From the powerful house steward and the stern housekeeper at the very top, down to the exhausted youngest scullery maid at the very bottom, everyone knew their exact place. It was a life of absolute dedication, endless routine, and deep, quiet resilience. As we journey deeper into the heart of this Victorian mansion tonight, let the calm and steady rhythm of the past guide you into a peaceful rest. We will explore the hidden staircases, the bustling kitchens, the strict rules of etiquette, and the personal dreams and quiet thoughts of the people who dedicated their lives to serving others. The channel Sleepy History with Benedict is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. The clock in the courtyard strikes 5. The deep, heavy chime echoes through the frosty morning air, but its sound barely penetrates the heavy wooden doors of the master bedrooms. Up in the highest peaks of the mansion, however, in the cramped and draughty attic rooms, that sound is a demanding call to reality. There are no silk sheets here, no thick rugs to protect bare feet from the biting cold of the bare floorboards. The housemaids and scullery maids awaken in the dark, their breath forming small faint clouds of mist in the unheated air. With quick practised movements they pull on their stiff wool stockings, heavy cotton petticoats, and plain print dresses. There is no time to linger, no luxury of a slow morning. The mansion is waking up, and the downstairs world must be ready before the upstairs world even stirs. Clutching a small flickering candle, the youngest housemaid makes her way down the narrow spiral back staircase. These stairs are steep and made of unpolished stone, hidden away behind thick doors so that the family and their guests never have to look upon them. Every step must be taken with absolute silence. To make a noise, to let a floorboard creak too loudly, or to drop a bucket would be a grave mistake. The golden rule of the Victorian mansion is absolute invisibility. The work must be done, but the workers must neither be seen nor heard. Reaching the ground floor, the air changes, growing thick with the scent of cold ash, soot, and damp stone. The maid's first and perhaps most crucial duty of the day is the hearths. In a mansion of this size there are dozens of fireplaces, each one the sole source of warmth for a specific room. She kneels before the great fireplace in the drawing room, the grand space where the mistress will sit later in the day. The ashes from the previous night must be carefully scooped out into a heavy iron cinder pail, ensuring not a single speck of dust escapes onto the expensive Persian carpets. Next comes the black leading, a tedious, back-breaking process of polishing the iron grate with a thick paste until it shines with a deep, dark lustre. Her hands, already rough and chapped from the harsh winter weather, turn black with soot, but there is no time to wash. She carefully lays the kindling, places the heavy lumps of coal, and strikes a match. As the first small flames begin to lick at the wood, she watches intently, blowing gently to encourage the fire. It must catch quickly, and it must burn cleanly, without throwing smoke into the room. One by one, she must repeat this ritual in the dining room, the library, and the master's study, racing against the rising sun. Down in the vast basement kitchen, another world is roaring to life. The great coal range, the massive iron heart of the culinary department, is being lit by the kitchen maid. It takes hours for this enormous stove to reach the precise temperatures required for baking bread, roasting meats, and boiling water. The air here is different. It is soon filled with the heavy smell of roasting coffee beans, the earthy scent of fresh potatoes being scrubbed in cold water, and the sharp aroma of wood smoke. The cook, a woman of immense authority in the downstairs hierarchy, stands at the centre of it all, shouting quiet but firm directions. The copper pans, polished until they reflect the firelight like mirrors, are lined up on the walls, ready for the monumental task of preparing breakfast. The morning light is now beginning to bleed through the tall windows, casting long pale shadows across the grand hallways. The house is warming up, the fires are crackling, and the aroma of breakfast is beginning to drift upward. The stage is set for the family, but for the servants, this is merely the end of the first hour of a 15-hour day. The heavy work has only just begun, and the endless list of daily chores awaits. As the mansion fully awakens, the invisible lines of authority that govern the household become deeply apparent. To the casual observer, the servants might have seemed like a single uniform group of workers, but inside the servants' quarters there existed a social hierarchy as rigid and unyielding as the British peerage itself. This downstairs world was divided into two distinct kingdoms, the domain of the butler and the domain of the housekeeper. Together they ruled with absolute authority, ensuring that discipline was maintained and that every order from the family was executed with flawless precision. The butler was the supreme authority of the male staff and the public face of the household service. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his appearance was indistinguishable from that of a gentleman, yet his life was entirely bound to duty. He held the silver keys to the wine cellar, a position of immense trust, as a single bottle of vintage wine could cost more than a junior maid's annual salary. He was responsible for the valuable family silver, which had to be counted, cleaned, and locked away every single night. Under his direct command were the footmen, tall and handsome young men chosen specifically for their height and appearance, who served the meals, opened the doors, and rode on the back of the family carriage to display the household's wealth. On the other side of this empire was the housekeeper. She was the undisputed queen of the female staff and the domestic economy, with a large ring of keys jingling softly at her waist, a symbolic sceptre of her power. She managed the linens, the stillroom, and the small army of housemaids. She was a woman of fierce discipline, often a widow or a spinster who had dedicated her entire existence to the preservation of someone else's home. Her eyes noticed everything: a speck of dust on a chandelier, a loose thread on a heavy velvet curtain, or a maid who dared to smile too brightly in the presence of a gentleman. The rigidity of this social structure was most vividly on display during meal times in the servants' hall. This large, plain room in the basement served as the dining room, living room, and social hub for the lower staff. But even here, in their rare moments of rest, there was no escaping the hierarchy. The seating arrangement at the long oak table was strictly dictated by rank, At the head of the table sat the butler and the housekeeper. Flanking them were the upper servants, the cook, the valet, and the lady's maid. At the far end of the table, lowest in status and farthest from the warmth of the fire, sat the ordinary housemaids, footman, and the lowly scullery maid. The meal itself followed a silent, traditional ritual. No junior servant was permitted to speak unless spoken to by an upper servant. The food, while usually hearty and abundant compared to what the poor received in the crowded cities, was served strictly according to rank. The best cuts of meat went to the head of the table, while the remnants were passed down to the younger staff. When the main course concluded, a fascinating migration occurred, known as the withdrawal. The butler, the housekeeper, and the upper servants would rise in unison, taking their dessert, cheese, and tea to the privacy of the housekeeper's room, leaving the junior staff behind to clean the hall in silence. This strict separation was not merely about maintaining power, it was deemed essential for the smooth operation of the mansion. In a house where dozens of people lived and worked in close quarters, clear boundaries prevented chaos. Yet beneath the silent obedience and the formal nods of agreement, the human heart remained unchanged. Jealousies simmered, alliances were secretly formed, and quiet glances were exchanged across the crowded dining table, hinting at the complex emotional lives hidden beneath the starched white aprons and polished buttons. As the sun reaches its highest point in the grey sky, the mansion moves into its afternoon rhythm. This is the time when the invisible labour becomes even more precise, transforming raw effort into seamless elegance. While the master of the house retreats to his library to read letters and the mistress prepares for afternoon visits, a quiet flurry of activity takes place in the dressing rooms upstairs and the laundry rooms deep in the outer wings. In the quiet sanctuary of the mistress's dressing room, the lady's maid is at work. Her position is unique. She does not belong to the rough world of the basement kitchen, nor does she share the freedom of the family. She exists in a delicate middle ground. Her hands must be gentle and her manners impeccable as she prepares the mistress's afternoon gown. Every crease must be smoothed out using a heavy flat iron heated over charcoal. She carefully inspects the intricate lace collars and silk ribbons, searching for the slightest stain or loose thread. To her, the mistress confides her daily worries, her social anxieties, and her secrets. The lady's maid listens in silence, offering a soft word of comfort while brushing the mistress's long hair with 100-stroke movements, yet she always remembers the invisible line that separates them. Meanwhile, in the master's dressing room, the valet is performing a similar, silent dance. He is the keeper of the gentleman's appearance. He polishes the leather riding boots until they reflect the room like glass, scrapes the razor against a leather strop to ensure a perfect shave, and brushes the wool coats to remove every speck of dust. A valet's success is measured by his master's presentation. If the gentleman looks flawless in society, the valet has done his duty. It is a relationship built on absolute discretion and loyalty, where the servant often knows the master better than his own family does. Down in the damp, steam-filled laundry house, far from the elegant smells of lavender and rosewater, the reality of domestic service is much harsher. Here the laundry maids spend their days surrounded by massive wooden tubs, heavy brass kettles of boiling water, and the sharp, stinging scent of lye soap. Victorian clothing is incredibly complex, made of layers of linen, cotton, wool, and silk. Washing these garments is not a matter of a few hours, but a grueling, multi-day process. The maids' arms are constantly red and swollen from the boiling water and harsh chemicals. They scrub heavy sheets by hand against corrugated washboards, wring out heavy wool skirts, using iron mangles that require immense physical strength to turn, and hang the linens on wooden racks to dry in the breeze. Despite the physical exhaustion, the work must be perfect. A single rust stain from an iron or a scorch mark on a white shirt could mean immediate dismissal without a reference. Back in the main house, the afternoon bells begin to ring, calling the footman to carry tea trays upstairs. The silver trays are heavy, loaded with delicate porcelain cups, silver teapots, and plates of thinly sliced cucumber sandwiches. The footman must walk with a perfectly steady, graceful stride up the grand staircase, his face a mask of polite indifference, showing no sign of the strain in his muscles. He steps into the drawing-room, places the tray with absolute quietness, and recedes into the shadows near the door, waiting for the next silent command. All stories on this channel, Sleepy History with Benedict, are fictional, thoughtfully crafted around historical themes and inspired by real events, figures and periods, reimagined for engaging storytelling. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals or events is purely coincidental. As the golden afternoon sun begins to sink below the horizon, casting long amber shadows across the estate, the mansion prepares for its most important ritual of the day, the grand evening dinner. Downstairs, the atmosphere shifts from steady routine to a state of quiet, high-stakes urgency. A Victorian dinner party is not merely a meal, it is a theatrical performance where the wealth, taste and social standing of the family are put on display for their elite guests. Every single detail must be flawless, and the burden of this perfection rests entirely upon the shoulders of the household staff. In the vast basement kitchen, the air is thick with heat, steam, and the rich aromas of roasting meats, simmering rich gravies, and delicate pastries. The cook stands at the centre of the room like a general commanding a battlefield. Copper pans clatter softly against the iron stove, and the scullery maids work furiously at the deep stone sinks, washing vegetables and scrubbing utensils as fast as they are used. The pressure is immense. A single burnt sauce or a cold dish served to a guest could ruin the reputation of the house, and the cook knows that her employment depends on the success of tonight's menu. Upstairs in the grand dining room, the butler and his footmen are executing a masterpiece of spatial precision. The long mahogany table, polished until it shines like dark water, is being dressed. A heavy undercloth of green baize is laid down first, to muffle the sound of plates, followed by a spotless, snow-white linen tablecloth that has been pressed to perfection. Using a wooden measuring rod, the footman ensures that every silver fork, knife and spoon is placed exactly 1 inch from the edge of the table and precisely aligned with the silver across from it. Crystal wine glasses, each intended for a different course, are wiped with soft chamois leather until they sparkle under the massive crystal chandelier. If you're enjoying this gentle journey into the quiet corners of history and find yourself drifting into a peaceful relaxation, please take a brief moment to support our storytelling by subscribing to the channel, leaving a warm comment or liking this video. Your kind support helps keep these sleepy historical tales alive. Now let your mind drift back into the quiet elegance of the dining room. As the final touches are placed, the elaborate silver centerpieces filled with fresh hothouse flowers, the crystal decanters filled with rich port wine, the first carriage wheels crunch against the gravel driveway outside. The heavy oak front doors are opened by the tall footman, and the guests step into the warm, glowing entrance hall, completely unaware of the hours of intense physical labor that have gone into creating this magical, welcoming atmosphere. The servants bow their heads respectfully, fading into the background as the evening begins, ready to serve through the long hours of the night. While the elegant chatter and the crystal-clear laughter of the dinner party echo through the floorboards from the grand rooms above, a different kind of quiet settles over the servants' quarters. The heavy physical labor of the day is slowly winding down, and for the first time in 15 hours, the staff is allowed a brief, precious moment to focus on themselves. They are no longer just faces in uniform or invisible hands moving through the shadows. They are human beings with their own memories, longings, and quiet dreams. Up in the narrow attic bedrooms where the roof slopes low and the window looks out over the dark, starlit treetops of the estate, a young housemaid sits on the edge of her iron cot. The room is cold, but she has wrapped herself in a worn wool shawl that her mother knitted for her before she left her small village. By the dim, flickering light of a single candle stub, she carefully unrolls a crumpled piece of paper, a letter from home that arrived a week ago, which she has already read a dozen times. The ink is slightly faded, carrying news of the harvest, the health of her younger siblings, and the quiet life of the countryside she left behind. For a few minutes, as she traces the handwritten lines with a rough finger, the grand Victorian mansion disappears, and she is back in the warm, crowded kitchen of her childhood. Domestic service in the 19th century often required a profound sense of isolation. To secure a position in a prestigious house, young men and women had to leave their families behind, sometimes travelling hundreds of miles to a town where they knew no one. They lived under the strict rules of their employers, who often restricted their ability to receive visitors or even go out on their days off. Loneliness was a constant, silent companion, yet within the walls of the mansion a deep, unspoken bond often formed among the staff. In the quiet evenings, over a shared pot of weak tea in the kitchen or a whispered conversation on the dark stairs, they became each other's family, sharing stories, comforting those who were homesick, and passing down advice on how to avoid the housekeeper's sharp temper. In the room next door, a young footman is carefully setting aside his heavy, brass-buttoned coat. He looks at his reflection in a small cracked mirror hanging on the whitewashed wall. He remembers the strict lessons in posture, the endless hours of standing perfectly still, and the polite, emotionless mask he must wear whenever he steps into the upstairs world. He wonders about his future, whether he will one day rise to the coveted position of butler, with his own set of silver keys and a comfortable room of his own, or whether he will save enough of his meagre wages to leave domestic service entirely and open a small shop in the growing city. The Victorian era was a time of rapid change, and the world outside the mansion walls was shifting with the rise of industries and new opportunities, but inside the grand estate, time seemed to move much slower, bound by traditions that had lasted for generations. As the candle burns low, casting dancing shadows against the bare walls, the servants lay their heads down on their thin pillows, listening to the distant muffled sounds of the carriage wheels outside, taking the guests away. The long day is finally drawing to a close, but the morning will bring the same relentless cycle of duty, and the invisible gears of the house will be expected to turn once more without a single hitch. When winter arrives and covers the grand Victorian estate in a thick, heavy blanket of white snow, the beauty of the landscape hides a period of intense physical hardship for the domestic staff. During these freezing months, the mansion becomes a demanding giant that requires constant, exhausting labour to keep warm and functional. While the family gathers in the drawing room, wrapped in luxurious furs and sipping hot spiced wine, the servants must endure the biting cold of the unheated corridors to ensure that the fires never die out. The daily routine becomes a battle against the ice. Early in the morning, before the sun has even thought of rising, the footmen and outdoor boys must carry heavy scuttles of coal up from the dark underground cellars. Each iron bucket weighs dozens of pounds, and they must be carried up steep, narrow staircases to every single room in the mansion. The constant lifting and carrying leaves their shoulders aching and their breath rising in thick plumes of white mist. There is no elevator, no central heating, only human muscle and determination moving tons of coal through the house week after week. For the housemaids, the winter cold brings a different kind of pain. Water for cleaning must be drawn from the outdoor pumps, which are often frozen solid and require boiling water just to open. When they wash the stone floors of the entrance hall or the long corridors, the water in their wooden buckets turns ice cold within minutes. Their fingers become red, swollen and covered in painful chilblains, cracks in the skin caused by the constant movement between freezing water and the hot air near the fireplaces, yet there is no time to complain and no space for weakness. A maid with bleeding hands is still expected to scrub the baseboards until they are spotless, her face showing nothing but quiet obedience. Up in the attic bedrooms, the winter nights are long and unforgiving. The thin wool blankets provided by the estate offer little protection against the freezing winds that howl through the gaps in the window frames. It is common for the servants to sleep in their full working clothes, piling their own coats and cloaks onto the beds in a desperate attempt to stay warm. In these dark hours, the quiet sound of coughing echoes through the long corridor of the attic. Illness is a constant danger. A simple cold can quickly turn into bronchitis or pneumonia in these damp, freezing conditions. If a servant becomes too sick to perform their duties, they face the terrifying prospect of being dismissed, losing not only their meagre income, but also the roof over their head. Despite these immense challenges, the winter season also brings a strange, quiet beauty to the downstairs world. In the evenings when the heavy work is done, the kitchen staff gathers around the massive coal range, which remains the warmest place in the entire house. The cook might share a leftover piece of mince pie, and the older footman might tell stories of previous winters or gossip about the family's eccentric relatives. In these small moments of shared warmth, surrounded by the smell of roasting chestnuts and hot tea, the harsh realities of their lives fade into the background, replaced by a deep sense of companionship and quiet survival that keeps them moving forward. As the deep night takes full possession of the Victorian estate, the final major duty of the day begins for the housemaids, the evening turn-down service. This is a time of quiet transition, where the servants move softly through the family's private bedchambers while the occupants are still downstairs finishing their dinner or enjoying a final glass of sherry. Every movement must be as silent as a whisper, ensuring that the private sanctuaries of the masters are perfectly prepared for a night of deep, luxurious rest. The maids carry heavy copper jugs of boiling water up the back stairs, pouring them into the large porcelain basins on the washstands so the family can wash before bed. They carefully draw the heavy velvet window curtains to shut out the black night and the cold draughts. Next comes the preparation of the beds themselves. The thick silk counterpanes are neatly folded back, and a long brass or stoneware hot water bottle, wrapped in soft flannel, is placed beneath the heavy sheets. This ensures that when the master or mistress climbs into bed, they are met with a comforting, enveloping warmth rather than the cold chill of the linen. If you are finding comfort in the soft, rhythmic cadence of these historical memories and feel a peaceful sleep drawing closer, please take a quiet moment to support our channel. Subscribing, leaving a gentle like, or sharing your thoughts in a comment helps us continue creating these serene journeys into the past. Let us return once more to the quiet, candlelit rooms of the mansion. The final touch of the turn-down service is the preparation of the night lights. The maids trim the wicks of the bedside candles and place a box of sulphur matches within easy reach. They stoke the bedroom fires one last time, adding a few heavy lumps of anthracite coal that will burn slowly and quietly through the small hours of the morning, maintaining a steady, comforting glow. As the maid steps backward out of the room, closing the door with a gentle click, she leaves behind a space of absolute comfort, a space created entirely by her hands, yet one that she will never be permitted to enjoy herself. She returns to the dark corridor, her mind already drifting toward the few hours of sleep that await her before the cycle begins anew. When Sunday morning arrives, a unique and subtle change washes over the grand Victorian mansion. The relentless, loud pace of weekday labour softens into a quiet, respectful solemnity. In Victorian Britain, Sunday was strictly observed as a day of rest and religious devotion, and this cultural rule extended to some degree even to the domestic staff. While the mansion could never stop functioning entirely, fires still needed to be fed and meals still had to be prepared. The heavy, deep-cleaning chores were put away. There was no scrubbing of floors, no beating of heavy carpets, and no polishing of silver on this sacred day. For the servants, Sunday offered a rare and precious opportunity to shed their working uniforms and put on their Sunday best. The housemaids traded their print dresses and starched white aprons for plain but neat dark gowns, while the footmen exchanged their livery coats with bright brass buttons for simple respectful suits. For a few hours, as they prepared to walk to the local village church, they looked less like invisible cogs in a great aristocratic machine, and more like ordinary citizens of the world outside. The walk to church was one of the few times during the week when the servants were permitted to leave the estate grounds. Walking down the long gravel driveway lined with ancient oak trees, they could feel the fresh, crisp air on their faces without the immediate pressure of a ticking clock. At the church, however, the strict social hierarchy of the mansion was once again mirrored in the seating arrangements. The family from the grand house sat in their private, cushioned pew near the front, closest to the altar, while the servants sat together in the cold plain benches at the very back. Yet during the singing of the hymns, their voices blended together under the high stone arches, creating a temporary, beautiful equality before the eyes of the world. After the church service, the afternoon brought a small window of free time, a luxury that was fiercely guarded by the staff. If the weather was fine, a maid might be allowed to take a quiet walk through the outer shrubberies or the kitchen gardens, away from the private lawns where the family sat. To sit on a wooden bench beneath the pale winter sun, doing absolutely nothing for an hour, was a profound pleasure for hands that were usually moving from sunrise to midnight. Others used this quiet time in the servants' hall to mend their personal clothing, write letters to distant relatives, or simply close their eyes by the side of the hearth, letting the gentle warmth soothe their aching muscles. As the afternoon light begins to fade into a soft, cool twilight, the brief spell of Sunday peace slowly dissolves. Down in the kitchen, the pans begin to clatter once more, and the footmen prepare to lay the table for the evening meal. The small window of freedom closes, and the heavy mantle of duty settles back onto their shoulders. But the memory of that quiet afternoon, the soft rustle of the wind in the trees, and the brief feeling of independence remains in their minds, a small light to carry them through the long, demanding week ahead. As the deep stillness of midnight wraps the upper floors of the mansion in absolute silence, the grand kitchen in the basement remains a place of quiet, lingering warmth. The massive coal range has been dampened down for the night, its iron belly glowing with a soft, deep red hue that casts long, flickering shadows across the clean stone floor. For the cook, this is the only time of day when the high-pressure demands of the household fade away, leaving her alone with the quiet craft she has spent a lifetime mastering. While the rest of the staff sleeps, she moves slowly around the large wooden prep table, setting the stage for tomorrow's culinary requirements. She gently kneads a large bowl of dough, covering it with a clean linen cloth so it can rise slowly in the ambient warmth of the stove overnight. She measures out dried beans, places rich bones into a heavy copper pot to simmer into a clear golden broth, and checks the dry storeroom to ensure every spice and ingredient is perfectly accounted for. In these quiet hours, her work is not just a chore, it is an art form, a silent contribution to the elegance of a world that rarely stops to think about the hands that feed it. If you find yourself drifting into a peaceful, deep relaxation while listening to these gentle echoes of history, please take a warm moment to support our channel by subscribing, hitting the like button, or sharing your comforting thoughts in a comment. You help ensure that these sleepy historical journeys continue to be told. Let your thoughts drift back to the warm, aromatic shadows of the Victorian kitchen. The cook finishes her nightly rounds, wiping down the heavy oak table until it is perfectly clean. She blows out the final whale oil lamp, plunging the room into the soft, comforting darkness of the midnight hour. Only the faint, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock breaks the silence, acting as a steady heartbeat for the sleeping mansion. The kitchen is ready, the preparations are complete, and as she climbs the stairs to her own bed, the house waits in perfect suspension for the first light of dawn to awaken the endless cycle once more. The season slowly shifts, and the dry winter cold gives way to the soft, rhythmic patter of autumn rain. Outside, the wind gently shakes the golden leaves from the ancient oak trees, sending them dancing across the dark gravel pathways of the estate. Inside the highest peak of the mansion, the sound of the rain against the slate roof is a soothing, continuous murmur, a natural lullaby for the tired souls who have spent their day fulfilling the wishes of others. In her small bedroom, a junior housemaid sits quietly by her washstand, listening to the water stream down the small glass window pane. In the absolute stillness of the night, the vast mansion feels less like a workplace and more like a great protective vessel sheltering everyone within from the storm outside. She takes out a needle and a spool of simple cotton thread, carefully mending a small tear in her personal handkerchief. This slow, repetitive movement of her hands brings a deep sense of inner peace in a life where every hour belongs to the comfort of someone else. These late-night minutes of quiet creation are incredibly sweet. She looks out into the dark, rainy night, wondering about the generations of servants who sat in this exact room before her, and those who will occupy it long after she is gone, all of them woven into the invisible fabric of this grand house. The world outside these stone walls is changing rapidly, with new inventions and bustling cities growing by the day, yet here, the quiet dedication to order, cleanliness and tradition remains untouched by the passage of time. The rain continues to fall, washing away the dust of the day and leaving behind a pristine, quiet world ready for tomorrow. As she finally puts away her sewing and gently blows out her candle, the soft darkness wraps around her, bringing a well-deserved peaceful rest to her mind and body. This content is inspired by and adapted from public domain works available through Project Gutenberg. The material has been transformed through original narration, editing, and storytelling to create a unique experience for educational and entertainment purposes. The cold, rainy seasons eventually fade away, making room for the soft, warm embrace of the midsummer months. In the height of summer, the grand Victorian mansion takes on an entirely different character. The heavy dark velvet drapes are pulled back during the day to let the brilliant sunlight illuminate the polished wood and glittering glass. But as night falls, the intense heat of the day remains trapped inside the thick stone walls. For the domestic staff, this brings a unique set of evening duties, transforming the mansion into a breezy, open sanctuary before the household sleeps. As the twilight deepens into a warm indigo night, the housemaids move quietly from room to room, gently opening the tall sash windows to invite the cool night air inside. A gentle breeze sweeps through the grand corridors, carrying with it the sweet, intoxicating scent of blooming white roses, damp earth, and lavender from the formal gardens below. The heavy, warm air of the daytime is replaced by a refreshing coolness that makes the vast house feel alive, breathing in the tranquility of the summer night. For a brief moment, while waiting for the family to finish their late evening stroll through the moonlit lawns, a young footman stands by a quiet open window in the long gallery. He leans his hands against the cool stone ledge, looking out over the dark silhouette of the estate. The sky above is a magnificent clear canopy of thousands of twinkling stars, untouched by the bright lights of the distant cities. In this peaceful stillness, away from the watchful eyes of the butler and the endless demands of etiquette, he lets his shoulders drop. The gentle hum of crickets in the grass below and the soft rustle of the ivy against the brickwork act as a soothing balm for his tired mind. He takes a deep, slow breath of the fragrant air, feeling a profound sense of calm wash over him. Downstairs, the scullery maids have finished washing the heavy summer berry trays and crystal ice cream bowls. They sit on the stone steps of the back courtyard, where the air is coolest, resting their aching feet. They speak in soft, muted whispers, their voices blending with the gentle nocturnal sounds of the countryside. They look up at the same starry sky, finding a strange shared comfort in its vastness. No matter how rigid their daytime lives are, the night belongs to no one. It is a free, peaceful expanse where their minds can wander wherever they please. One by one, the lamps inside the mansion are turned down, leaving only the silver moonlight to guide the way through the corridors. The open windows let the soothing symphony of the summer night drift into every bedroom, lulling both the masters and the servants into a deep, restful slumber. As the young housemaid climbs the stairs to the attic, she catches a glimpse of the moon reflecting in a large mirror at the end of the hall, casting a soft, ethereal glow across the floor. The house is peaceful, the air is cool, and the quiet world rests in perfect harmony under the watchful gaze of the summer stars. The clock in the grand hallway strikes 3 in the morning. This is the hour of absolute stillness, the deep, dark divide between the day that has passed and the dawn that has yet to arrive. In this profound quiet, the Victorian mansion feels entirely suspended in time. The fires have burned down to a gentle, pulsing bed of red embers, casting a warm, soft glow across the hearths, while the silver moonlight streams through the tall arched windows, painting long, pale squares of light across the patterned carpets. Through this world of shadows, a single figure moves with complete silence. It is the housekeeper, carrying a small brass chamber candlestick, its flame dancing gently in the cool draught of the long corridor. Her keys, usually jingling softly at her waist during the busy daytime hours, are held tightly in her hand, so they do not make a single sound. This nightly round is her personal ritual, a quiet walk through the silent empire she guards with such fierce devotion. She steps into the grand drawing-room, checking to ensure that every heavy porcelain vase is in its proper place, that the velvet cushions have been neatly plumped, and that no stray spark has escaped from the cooling hearth. As she stands alone in the centre of the vast, dark room, the stern expression she wears during the day softens into a quiet, reflective peace. She remembers when she first arrived at this mansion decades ago as a young, frightened scullery maid, her hands rough from scrub brushes and her heart full of homesickness. She thinks of the endless line of young women she has trained since then, watching them grow, learn the quiet art of dignity, and eventually move on to establish homes of their own. To the family upstairs, she is an indispensable manager, a symbol of perfect order. But in this quiet hour, she is simply a witness to the passage of time, a human bridge between the history of the house and the lives lived within its walls. She walks to the window and looks out over the sleeping estate. The mist has rolled in from the river, wrapping the formal gardens and the distant stone fountains in a soft white shroud. Everything is clean, orderly, and peaceful. Her staff is asleep in the rooms above, their bodies resting from the immense physical demands of their labour, and the family is safe in their luxurious beds. The massive, complex machinery of the household is completely at rest, held together entirely by the invisible thread of duty and mutual reliance. She slowly makes her way back toward the service wing, her candle casting long, dancing silhouettes against the whitewashed walls of the stone staircase. She knows that in just 2 hours the courtyard clock will strike 5, the attic rooms will awaken, and the heavy iron stoves will be lit once more. The endless cycle of domestic life will resume without a single moment of hesitation. But for now, the darkness is deep, the air is perfectly still, and the grand mansion slumbers in absolute beautiful serenity under the quiet watch of the night. The sky outside the high attic windows begins to shift from the deep, velvety black of midnight to a soft, smoky shade of charcoal grey. A heavy morning mist has settled over the valley, clinging gently to the tops of the ancient oak trees and wrapping the stone fountains in a quiet, ethereal shroud. The world outside is completely motionless, caught in that beautiful, fragile moment just before the first bird begins to sing and before the sun forces its way through the cool morning dampness. Inside his small room next to the master's dressing suite, the valet stands quietly by his window, looking down at the silent courtyard. He has risen a few minutes before his official time, not out of a sense of urgency, but to claim a small pocket of absolute silence for himself. In these precious moments the world demands nothing of him. He is not a shadow waiting to brush a coat or polish a pair of boots. He is simply a man observing the slow, magnificent turning of the earth. He watches a solitary deer glide silently out from the edge of the woods, stepping softly across the dew-kissed grass of the lawn before disappearing into the mist. There is a deep, comforting poetry in the scene, a reminder that despite the rigid rules and human hierarchies created inside the stone walls of the mansion, the natural world outside operates on a completely different ancient rhythm of freedom and peace. Down in the silent scullery, the morning light is just beginning to filter through the iron-barred windows, catching the clean, dry edges of the copper pots stacked neatly on the shelves. The air smells of cold stone, lavender soap, and the faint, sweet trace of yesterday's wood smoke. In the absolute stillness, the house seems to hold its breath. This repetition of days, the lighting of fires, the setting of tables, the carrying of trays, which could feel like a heavy burden during the heat of midday, feels entirely different in the quiet of early dawn. It feels like a comforting anchor, a steady and predictable path through the uncertainty of life. Every chore performed by the staff is a small act of care that preserves the beauty and safety of this shared sanctuary. The valet takes a deep, grounding breath, letting the coolness of the morning air fill his lungs and soothe his thoughts. He knows that very soon the heavy iron bell in the courtyard will strike, the floors will begin to creak, and the invisible gears of the Victorian mansion will roar back to life with a familiar, grand energy. But as he reaches for his starched white collar and prepares to step into his role for the day, his heart remains perfectly calm, anchored by the serene beauty of the dawn and the quiet strength found in the silence of the night. As the long, freezing grip of winter slowly relaxes, the first warm whispers of spring begin to drift across the grand Victorian estate. The thick morning mists roll away, revealing pale golden sunlight that gently touches the budding branches of the ancient oak trees and warms the damp stone walls of the mansion. For the domestic staff, the arrival of spring is marked not by rest, but by one of the most demanding and famous rituals of the 19th century, the grand spring cleaning. This was an immense house-wide operation designed to strip away every single trace of winter soot, coal dust and grease, restoring the mansion to a state of absolute gleaming perfection. Every corner of the house becomes a hive of quiet, organized activity. Under the strict direction of the housekeeper, the junior maids begin the monumental task of stripping the rooms. Heavy velvet curtains, which have absorbed months of fireplace smoke, are carefully unhooked and carried down to the courtyard to be beaten, brushed and aired out in the fresh breeze. The massive Persian rugs are rolled up by the strong arms of the footmen and taken outside, where they are hung over thick wooden rails. With heavy wicker carpet beaters, the servants strike the rugs, in a steady, rhythmic cadence, sending clouds of grey winter dust flying into the warm spring air. Inside the grand drawing-room, the housemaids are on their knees, executing a delicate and meticulous cleaning process. Before the invention of modern vacuums, walls and ceilings were gently swept with long-handled brooms wrapped in clean white flannel cloths to catch every microscopic speck of soot. The expensive wooden furniture, mahogany, walnut and rosewood, is treated with a special mixture of beeswax and turpentine. The maids rub the polish into the wood with soft rags, moving their hands in slow, circular motions for hours until the surfaces reflect the sunlight like polished mirrors. Their arms grow heavy and their backs ache, but there is a strange, quiet satisfaction in watching the dark, dull wood come back to life, glowing with a deep, rich warmth under their touch. Meanwhile, the windows of the mansion, dozens of large multi-paned glass structures, must be washed until they are completely invisible. A maid balance carefully on the wide stone ledges, using a mixture of vinegar and water, wiping the glass with old newspaper to ensure a streak-free shine. As she works, she can look out over the formal gardens, where the first yellow daffodils and purple crocuses are pushing their way through the dark soil. The sweet, fresh scent of cut grass and blooming primroses drifts through the open windows, completely replacing the heavy, stagnant smell of winter coal smoke. By the time the afternoon sun begins to set, casting long, amber shadows across the clean rooms, the mansion feels entirely transformed. The air is light, fresh, and filled with the clean scent of beeswax and spring air. The heavy work is far from over. There are still dozens of rooms to clean, and hundreds of crystal chandelier drops to polish one by one, but the atmosphere downstairs has shifted. The dark, cold days of winter are gone, and the new season brings a quiet sense of hope and renewal to the servants' quarters. They lay down to rest with tired limbs but peaceful minds, listening to the gentle evening breeze rustle the curtains of their clean, fresh sanctuaries. As the vibrant greens of summer gently deepen into the rich, warm amber and rust tones of late autumn, the Victorian estate prepares for the traditional harvest festival. This is a time of immense abundance where the earth yields its final gifts before the long winter sleep. For the domestic staff, this transition brings a different kind of labour, one that is deeply connected to the land and the changing seasons. The focus shifts from the formal social gatherings of the city to the quiet, grounding work of preservation and storage deep within the stone walls of the mansion. Down in the spacious, cool cellars beneath the kitchen, the air becomes rich with the sweet, earthy scents of the autumn bounty. The head gardener and his assistants spend their afternoons wheeling massive wooden barrows up to the back entrance, loaded with the fruits of their year-long care. There are heavy crates of crisp red apples, dusty orange pumpkins, and sacks of potatoes still clinging to the dark, rich soil of the estate's gardens. The scullery maids and junior housemaids are called down to help organize the storerooms. Each apple must be carefully inspected by hand. A single bruised fruit could spoil the entire batch. They wrap the perfect apples gently in scraps of soft tissue paper, laying them out in single layers on wide slatted wooden shelves where the air can circulate freely. Upstairs in the kitchen, the massive iron stove roars with a cheerful, cracking fire from dawn until late into the night. The cook is in her element, surrounded by huge copper-preserving pans that bubble with sweet, deeply coloured mixtures of plum jams, blackberry jellies, and spiced chutneys. The sharp, warming aroma of cinnamon, cloves, and boiling sugar floats out of the kitchen doors, drifting up the hidden staircases and filling the cold stone corridors with a wonderful sense of comfort and warmth. The junior kitchen maids spend hours coring apples, peeling heavy squash, and straining rich juices through muslin cloths until their arms are exhausted and their fingers are stained with the deep purple of autumn berries. Yet, despite the physical effort, there is a distinct, joyful energy in the room, an unspoken feeling of security that comes from knowing the larder is full and the house is prepared for the coming cold months. In the late evening, when the family has finished their dinner of roasted game and autumn vegetables, a deep, respectful quiet falls over the servants' quarters. The heavy copper pots are scrubbed and hung back on their iron hooks, reflecting the soft, fading light of the stove embers like small setting suns. The staff gathers in the servants' hall, where the butler has permitted a small fire to be lit in the hearth. They sit together with mugs of warm, spiced cider, listening to the wind howl softly through the trees outside, scattering the dry leaves across the lawn. They look at each other with tired eyes but peaceful hearts. The work has been long and hard, but there is a deep, instinctual comfort in seeing the shelves fully stocked and the mansion secure against the winter. They are the caretakers of this grand world, the ones who transform the raw fruits of the earth into the orderly elegance enjoyed by the family above. As they prepare to climb the stairs to their beds, the soft warmth of the kitchen stove stays with them, a gentle reminder of the abundance they have helped secure, and they drift into sleep with minds completely at ease, comforted by the steady, predictable turning of the seasons. The gentle autumn breeze eventually gives way to the wild, unpredictable storms of the deep winter months. Tonight a powerful gale blows across the open countryside, bringing with it heavy, driving rain that lashes furiously against the stone walls of the Victorian mansion. The wind howls through the grand chimneys, creating a deep, haunting melody that echoes in the empty fireplace grates upstairs. In the highest parts of the house, inside the small attic bedrooms, the sound of the storm is intense, a dramatic reminder of the wild nature that surrounds this isolated estate. But inside the mansion, a different kind of quiet is maintained. While the storm rages outside, the junior footman and the under-housemaid carry out a vital silent duty, the nightly storm patrol. Equipped with heavy brass lanterns and large wooden buckets, they move softly through the dark, cavernous rooms of the upper floors. Their main responsibility is to check for leaks in the roof and windows. In a house filled with priceless oil paintings, delicate silk wallpapers and antique furniture, a single undetected leak could cause catastrophic damage before the morning arrives. They step into the grand library, where rows of thousands of leather-bound books stand in silent rows from the floor to the high ceiling. The room is dark, save for the small circle of golden light cast by their lanterns. The footman walks slowly along the perimeter, his eyes scanning the ceiling panels, looking for the telltale dark spots of dampness. He pauses near the large bay window, where the rain is beating a fierce, rhythmic tattoo against the thick glass. He kneels, checking the heavy wooden sills for any sign of water seeping through the aging putty. Everything is dry, tight and secure. The thick stone walls, built generations ago by master craftsmen, hold firm against the elements, protecting the history and knowledge stored within. Next, they make their way down to the long picture gallery, where the portraits of the family's ancestors look down from the walls with stern, pale faces. The large flashes of lightning outside cast sudden brilliant shadows through the skylight, illuminating the faces of the old lords and ladies for a split second before plunging the room back into darkness. The housemaid checks the corners of the room, her movements soft and careful. She places a small towel near the base of a door to block a cold draught, ensuring the ambient temperature remains steady. There is a profound sense of responsibility in their work. They are the midnight guardians of this museum of private history, trusted completely to keep the storm at bay. As they finish their rounds and head back toward the servants' staircase, they look back at the grand, silent rooms. The contrast between the chaotic storm outside and the absolute peaceful security inside is beautiful. The mansion feels like a grand stone fortress, completely unshakable. Down in the basement, the embers of the kitchen stove still provide a gentle, radiating warmth that rises through the floorboards. The servants return to their beds, their minds at peace, knowing that the house is safe under their watch. They close their eyes, letting the heavy, distant sound of the rain and wind lull them into a deep, comforting sleep, protected completely from the winter storm outside. When the height of summer arrives, the grand Victorian mansion shifts into a different pattern of survival. The days become intensely hot, and the sun rises early, casting brilliant, blinding rays across the vast lawns long before the normal hours of the morning. To combat the oppressive heat that threatens to spoil the food in the larders and make the grand rooms uncomfortable, the domestic staff must alter their routines. The early morning hours between 4 and 6 become the most precious and peaceful time of the entire day. The kitchen maids and under-footmen awaken while the sky is still a soft pale violet. They slide quietly out of their beds, grateful for the cool air that has drifted into the attic during the night. Their first task is to open the heavy back doors and let the fresh dew-scented breeze circulate through the lower brick stone corridors. The air smells of damp earth, morning mist, and the sweet, clean scent of wild clover from the nearby meadows. There is a magnificent deep silence hanging over the estate at this hour, broken only by the first tentative notes of a lone blackbird greeting the dawn. One of the most fascinating duties during these hot summer months involves a journey to the ice house, a mysterious, subterranean stone structure built deep into the side of a shaded hill far from the main house. Inside this underground chamber, hidden beneath thick layers of straw and earth, are massive blocks of ice that were cut from the frozen lakes during the dead of winter. The junior footman is sent with a heavy canvas sack and an iron pick to retrieve what is needed for the day. As he descends the damp stone steps into the darkness, the temperature drops dramatically. Within seconds, the oppressive summer heat disappears, replaced by a freezing, silent cold that takes his breath away. He uses the iron pick to carefully break off large chunks of crystal-clear ice. These pieces will be carried back to the mansion's dairy and larders to keep the fresh cream, butter, and meats perfectly chilled. Some of the finest ice will be delivered directly to the cook, who uses it to create elaborate, delicate ice creams and frozen fruit sorbets for the family's afternoon garden parties. Standing in the cool darkness of the ice house, listening to the rhythmic, echoing tick of melting water drops, the footman finds a moment of intense, refreshing peace. It is a hidden world of winter preserved right in the heart of summer, a secret sanctuary known only to the servants who maintain it. By the time he returns to the surface, carrying the heavy, freezing sack on his shoulder, the golden sun has climbed higher into the sky, warming the gravel paths and making the morning dew sparkle like millions of tiny diamonds. The mansion is slowly waking up, and the heavy, humid air of the summer day begins to settle over the lawns once more, but the servants move through their duties with a quiet inner calmness. They have tasted the cool serenity of the dawn and the deep, silent peace of the underground shadows, and that refreshing feeling stays with them, a gentle comfort that carries them smoothly through the long, warm hours ahead. As the autumn nights grow longer and the sharp silver frost begins to settle over the open fields of the estate, another hidden world of dedication operates in the dark. Away from the main stone house, at the edge of the formal walled gardens, stands the great glass conservatory, the orangery. This magnificent structure of iron and glass is a symbol of the master's immense wealth, housing exotic tropical plants, delicate orange trees, and rare orchids brought from the farthest corners of the world. But during the cold autumn nights, these fragile plants face a silent enemy, the freezing British frost. To protect this green sanctuary, the head gardener and his underhouse boys must maintain a relentless, quiet vigil through the dark hours. Beneath the beautiful glass floors of the conservatory lies a complex labyrinth of brick tunnels and iron pipes, a subterranean heating system fueled by a small dedicated coal furnace. The junior gardener's task tonight is to stay awake, monitoring the temperature gauges and regularly shoveling fresh coal into the iron belly of the furnace to ensure a steady, gentle warmth rises through the floorboards above. Moving up from the hot, dusty boiler room into the main glasshouse, the transition is magical. While the outside world is cold, dark, and frozen, inside the conservatory, the air is thick, warm, and humid. It smells beautifully of damp peat, rich earth, and the sweet, uplifting fragrance of blooming citrus trees and night-blooming jasmine. The silver moonlight streams through the hundreds of glass panes overhead, illuminating the massive fan-shaped leaves of tropical palms and casting beautiful, lace-like shadows across the stone pathways. It is an artificial paradise, completely isolated from the harsh British climate, just inches away on the other side of the glass. The young gardener walks slowly down the narrow pathways, a small lantern in his hand, casting a warm amber glow on the exotic foliage. He uses a small brass mister to gently spray water onto the leaves of a rare fern, listening to the soft, rhythmic patter of water droplets falling onto the soil. There is an incredible, deep sense of peace in this warm, green room. Away from the strict hierarchy of the servants' hall and the sharp eyes of the housekeeper, he feels completely at ease. He is the quiet guardian of this living collection, a silent protector, ensuring that when the family visits tomorrow afternoon, they will find nothing but effortless tropical beauty. The furnace crackles softly below, maintaining its comforting, steady hum through the small hours of the morning. Outside, the wind rustles the bare branches of the oak trees, but inside, the orange trees remain safe, warm, and perfectly sheltered. The young gardener rests against a wooden bench, watching the mist form on the inside of the glass panes, completely content in his silent, fragrant sanctuary. The night moves forward in perfect tranquillity, and the delicate world under his care sleeps soundly, waiting for the first golden rays of the morning sun to light up the glass dome once more. Deep within the stone corridors of the domestic wing, adjacent to the bustling kitchen, but entirely separate in its atmosphere, lies the still room. In a grand Victorian mansion, this room was a sanctuary of natural remedies, delicate flavours and traditional household wisdom. While the outer world is now completely dark and the heavy iron gates of the estate are locked for the night, a soft, warm light glows from the still-room window. Inside, the still-room maid is at work, surrounded by the quiet, aromatic mysteries of her craft. The walls of this small, clean room are lined with floor-to-ceiling wooden cabinets, each packed with hundreds of small glass jars, porcelain pots and brown apothecary bottles. From the exposed ceiling beams hang tightly tied bunches of dried lavender, rosemary, thyme and chamomile, filling the air with a deeply comforting, herbal fragrance. The still-room maid's duties are incredibly precise and gentle. During the day, she gathers fresh blossoms from the walled gardens. At night, she transforms them. She sits by a small brass stove, carefully watching a copper still as it gently distills pure water and fresh rose petals into sweet, fragrant rose water, which the mistress will use to refresh her skin in the morning. With a heavy marble pestle and mortar, she grinds dried marigold petals and clean beeswax together, creating a soothing ointment to heal the chapped, rough hands of the housemaids who work in the cold laundry rooms. There is no rush here, no shouting or clattering of iron pans. The work requires absolute patience and a delicate touch. She measures out dried elderberries and honey to make a warm, rich syrup for the winter coughs, and mixes secret blends of black tea, dried orange peel and jasmine blossoms for the family's afternoon tea trays. In this quiet space, she operates as a gentle healer and an artist, practicing skills passed down through generations of women. As the midnight hour passes, she prepares a final, special task. She brews a small porcelain pot of pure chamomile and valerian root tea, letting the sweet, earthy steam rise into the room. A cup of this soothing infusion will be taken up to the housekeeper, and another will be kept for herself to ease the tension of the long day. The rhythmic, soft grinding of her mortar and the gentle hiss of the boiling kettle are the only sounds breaking the midnight silence. The air in the still room is warm, heavy with the deeply relaxing scents of the earth, acting as a natural sedative for the mind. Outside, the night is silent and the stars are bright, but inside this fragrant haven, time seems to stop entirely. The still-room maid places the final glass jars neatly back onto their shelves, labelling them in her neat, careful handwriting. Her workspace is perfectly ordered, her remedies are prepared, and she rests her hands for a moment, breathing in the peaceful, healing atmosphere of her private kingdom. The house around her sleeps in deep tranquillity, completely protected and nurtured by the quiet magic of her traditional art. Outside the heavy stone walls of the main mansion, across the wide, snow-covered courtyard, lies the stable block. Tonight the winter wind blows fiercely, drifting high banks of powdery white snow against the stable's large oak doors. Inside, however, the atmosphere shifts into a warm, rustic sanctuary. The air is thick with the comforting, rich scents of sweet clover, dry golden straw, leather polish, and the natural warmth of the magnificent horses resting in their stalls. The stable groom moves softly down the wide stone gangway, a single storm lantern in his hand, casting a low, flickering golden glow against the wooden partitions. His movements are slow and deliberate, designed not to startle the sleeping animals. His final duty of the night is to ensure that every horse is perfectly comfortable and protected from the freezing dropping temperatures outside. He steps into the stall of a large jet-black carriage horse, gently patting its velvet nose. The horse lets out a long, warm breath that rises like a soft plume of mist in the cool air, leaning its head affectionately against the groom's shoulder. With practiced care, the groom lifts a heavy, lined wool blanket, draping it securely over the horse's back and buckling it across the chest to trap its body heat. He then uses a wooden pitchfork to shake out fresh, deep layers of clean, dry straw around its hooves, creating a soft, insulating bed for the animal to rest upon. In the background, the only sounds are the rhythmic, soothing crunch of a mare chewing her evening ration of hay and the gentle, occasional stamp of a hoof on the cobblestone. These steady, natural noises create a deeply hypnotic, peaceful cadence that blankets the entire stable in a sense of absolute security. The groom sits down for a moment on a clean upturned wooden crate near the tack room, where a small iron stove throws out a gentle radiating heat. He watches the shadows of the harness leather and polished brass fixtures dance softly on the whitewashed walls. In this quiet, nocturnal world, far removed from the strict etiquette and endless silver polishing of the main house, he finds a profound grounding peace. He shares a deep, unspoken bond of companionship with the animals under his care, a mutual reliance that keeps them all safe through the harshest nights of the year. He checks the iron bolts on the outer doors one last time, ensuring the winter storm remains firmly outside. The wind rumbles against the roof, but inside the stables the air remains calm, cosy, and perfectly still. The horses are warm, their bellies are full, and they slowly lower their heads to drift into sleep. The groom turns down his lantern, leaving only a tiny amber spark of light to guide his way, and rests his head back, completely enveloped by the serene rustic tranquillity of the midnight stable, as the world outside continues to sleep under its heavy blanket of snow. As the absolute silence of the midnight hour deepens, the grand library of the Victorian estate becomes a sanctuary of quiet thoughts and ancient memories. Located in a secluded wing of the mansion, far from the echoes of the kitchen and the shared spaces of the servants' hall, this vast room holds the intellectual history of generations. While the heavy snow continues to fall outside, blanketing the dark gardens in a soft, sound-absorbing layer of white, a single oil lamp burns quietly on a massive mahogany writing desk inside. The air in the library is rich and unique, filled with the comforting, deeply nostalgic scents of old paper, leather-bound covers, aged vellum, and the faint sweetness of polished oak wood. For the estate's private secretary and librarian, these late-night hours offer a precious period of uninterrupted concentration. Surrounded by towering bookshelves that reach up into the darkness of the high ceiling, he moves slowly, his footsteps completely silenced by the thick plush Persian carpets beneath his feet. His hands, accustomed to the delicate touch of historical documents, handle each volume with immense reverence. Tonight, his task is the preservation of the family's oldest archives. He sits under the soft amber glow of the lamp, using a small, fine brush to gently clear away any dust from the edges of a hand-drawn map dating back to the 17th century. He carefully applies a special leather restorative to the worn covers of ancient philosophical texts, smoothing out the cracks caused by years of fireplace heat. The slow, rhythmic rustle of turning pages and the gentle, steady tick of the long case clock in the corner are the only sounds that break the majestic quiet of the room. It is a slow, meditative labour that connects him directly to the minds of the past, a silent dialogue conducted in the dead of night. He pauses for a moment, resting his eyes, and looks toward the tall arched windows. The frosted glass panels reflect the tiny dancing flame of his lamp, while outside the silent flakes of snow drift past in the dark. In this vast room of knowledge containing the poetry, science, and history of the world, all the chaotic worries of daily life seem to dissolve into insignificance. The strict social structures and frantic schedules of the daytime mansion feel incredibly distant, replaced by a timeless, profound serenity that blankets his mind in absolute calm. He neatly organizes the loose papers, placing them into heavy archival boxes, and slides the restored books back onto their proper shelves. He turns down the wick of the oil lamp, reducing the bright flame to a small, sleepy golden bead of light that slowly fades away as he steps out of the library, locking the heavy oak door with a soft, satisfying click. He leaves the room to its own peaceful slumbers. The thousands of books rest in the dark, safe and secure, while the gentle spirit of the quiet library stays with him, guiding his thoughts into a deep, dreamless and beautiful sleep. Stepping away from the main residential wings across a small stone path in the rear courtyard sits the laundry house. During the day, this is arguably the most exhausting and humid place on the entire Victorian estate, a room filled with the roaring heat of boiling copper vats, the constant splashing of soapy water, and the heavy physical strain of wringing out hundreds of pounds of wet linens. But now, past the midnight hour, the laundry house has transformed into a surprisingly peaceful, warm and comforting haven. The intense dampness of the daytime has evaporated, leaving behind an incredibly clean, soothing atmosphere. The air is thick with the comforting, nostalgic scents of pure lye soap, starch and lavender water, mixed with the gentle, dry heat radiating from the large brick drying stoves that are slowly cooling down for the night. Long rows of white linen sheets, delicate tablecloths, and cotton nightgowns hang from wooden pulley racks high near the ceiling. They sway ever so gently in the ambient warmth, looking like soft, silent clouds suspended in the shadows of the room. The senior laundry maid sits quietly on a smooth wooden bench by the iron stove, a single candle resting on the folding table beside her, while the younger girls have long since gone upstairs to sleep. She prefers to spend these late-night moments finishing the final, quietest part of her routine. She takes a freshly dried, crisp white bedsheet, smoothing it out across the scrubbed pine table with her rough, experienced hands. With slow, rhythmic movements, she folds the linen into perfect, neat squares, pressing down on the edges to create clean, satisfying creases. There is a deeply meditative quality to this repetitive task. Each fold represents order, cleanliness, and the completion of a hard day's work. As she works, the silver moonlight pours through the tall, uncurtained windows, illuminating the rising steam from her final cup of herbal tea and painting long, serene lines of light across the stone floor. Outside, a gentle spring rain begins to fall, its soft musical patter against the window panes blending beautifully with the faint, warm crackle of the dying stove embers. In this absolute isolation, away from the constant supervision of the housekeeper and the frantic pace of the main house, she finds a profound restorative solitude. She is surrounded by the tangible results of her dedication, soft, fragrant fabrics that will bring comfort and deep sleep to everyone in the mansion tomorrow night. She stacks the last pile of pristine linens into a large wicker basket, covering it with a clean cloth to protect it from any overnight dust. She blows out her candle, letting the cool blue moonlight completely take over the room. The laundry house is quiet, the air is beautifully fragrant and warm, and the long lines of white cloth rest in the dark like sleeping spirits. As she walks back across the damp courtyard to her own bed, the deep, serene peace of her private workspace follows her, lulling her mind into a state of absolute, effortless calm. When the clock strikes midnight, a very specific and mesmerizing rhythm takes full possession of the grand Victorian mansion. Throughout the dozens of rooms, corridors, and grand galleries, there are over 50 antique timepieces, magnificent grandfather clocks encased in dark mahogany, delicate porcelain pendulum clocks on bedroom mantels, and heavy brass bracket clocks in the study. To ensure that the entire estate moves in perfect synchronized harmony during the busy daytime hours, a single dedicated craftsman is trusted with their nightly care. Moving silently through the dimly lit corridors, the mansion's horologist carries a small leather case containing fine brass keys, delicate screwdrivers, and a small vial of pure whale oil. His work begins when everyone else has gone to bed, allowing him to listen to the true, undisturbed voice of each machine. He steps into the grand hall where the towering long-case clock stands like a silent sentinel. Under the soft, golden glow of his lantern, he gently opens the long wooden door of the clock, revealing the heavy brass weights and the long polished pendulum swinging back and forth in a slow, hypnotic cadence. With absolute precision and patience, he inserts the winding key into the small arbors on the clock face, turning it slowly. The rhythmic mechanical clicking of the internal gears winding up is a deeply satisfying ancient sound that echoes softly against the high stone ceiling. He applies a microscopic drop of oil to the escape wheel, ensuring its movement remains friction-free and silent. As he works, he is completely enveloped by the continuous layered symphony of the house, a gentle ambient chorus of tick-tock, tick-tock that pulses through the dark rooms like a steady collective heartbeat. This repetitive, predictable sound has a profoundly soothing, almost hypnotic effect on the mind, washing away the chaotic thoughts of the world outside. He moves from room to room, adjusting a pendulum by a fraction of a millimeter here, tightening a tiny brass screw there. In the quietest hours of the night, his work feels less like a technical chore and more like a gentle meditation. He is the keeper of time itself, the man who ensures that the past flows smoothly into the future without a single hitch. He watches the silver moonlight filter through the tall windows, catching the steady metallic swing of the brass pendulums, creating tiny dancing reflections on the dark wooden walls. As he winds the final small carriage clock in the morning room, the entire house seems to settle into an even deeper, more resonant state of tranquility. The synchronized ticking creates a protective blanket of sound that isolates the mansion from the wild winter wind howling outside the window panes. He closes his leather kit, turns down his lantern, and stands for a final moment in the dark hallway, listening to the beautiful mechanical lullaby of the house. Everything is aligned, the gears are smooth, and as he slips away to his own room, the steady, rhythmic pulse of the mansion guides his thoughts into a state of absolute peaceful and perfect rest. Far beneath the grand reception rooms and the busy stone corridors of the servants' wing, a heavy iron-studded oak door leads down into the deepest part of the Victorian Mansion, the wine cellars. Tonight, as the freezing winter frost thickens on the lawns above, a profound, unmoving silence fills this subterranean world. Down here, deep within the foundations of the estate, the chaotic sounds of the wind and weather completely vanish. The air is cool still, and completely stable, maintaining the exact same temperature month after month, year after year. The butler, acting tonight in his traditional role as the keeper of the cellar, descends the spiral stone steps with a heavy brass keyring and a single low-burning oil lamp. As he reaches the bottom, the ambient light catches the majestic rows of brick arches stretching into the darkness, each bay filled with floor-to-ceiling wooden racks. The air is rich and comforting, carrying the deep, nostalgic sense of aged oak casks, damp earth, old cork, and the sweet, complex aroma of fermenting fruits and fine vintage wines that have slept in the dark for decades. His nightly task here is a slow, peaceful ritual of preservation. Moving down the narrow stone alleys, he holds his lamp close to the dusty bottles, checking the status of the corks to ensure no air has compromised the precious liquids within. He uses a soft cloth to gently clear away a thick layer of dust from a row of priceless Bordeaux wines from a legendary summer harvest long past. There is no urgency in his movements. The cellar operates on the timeline of generations, not hours. The absolute stillness of the underground world wraps around him like a heavy protective blanket, allowing his mind to completely release the rigid responsibilities and social stresses of his daytime duties upstairs. He steps into the inner vault where the massive oak barrels of aging port and sherry are kept. He kneels to check the wooden bungs, listening closely to the silence, capturing the faint, comforting scent of the wood interacting with the warming spirit inside. In this hidden sanctuary, surrounded by the liquid history of the estate, he feels a deep sense of connection to the past. These bottles were laid down by men who occupied his position before he was born, and they will be served by those who follow him. He is simply the quiet custodian of this sleeping liquid treasure. Having completed his inspection and ensuring that the vault remains perfectly secure, he prepares to return to the world above. He turns down the wick of his lamp, allowing the deep, velvety shadows to reclaim the brick arches and the thousands of resting bottles. The cellar returns to its timeless, beautiful slumber, untouched by the passing hours. As he locks the heavy iron door behind him and climbs the stairs toward his bedroom, the profound, unmoving peace of the deep earth stays with him, guiding his thoughts into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply restorative rest. As the deep clock in the courtyard strikes 4, the Victorian mansion reaches its pinnacle of peaceful vulnerability, while the entire household, from the grand aristocratic family to the youngest scullery maid, is locked in the deep embrace of heavy sleep. A lone guardian keeps watch over their safety. The night watchman steps out from his small station near the back entrance, beginning his final slow patrol through the transitional hours where night gently prepares to meet the dawn. The air of the late spring night is cool, crisp, and incredibly clear. Carrying a heavy brass lantern that casts a wide, sweeping arc of amber light onto the gravel paths, he walks along the perimeter of the great stone house. His heavy boots make a soft, rhythmic crunching sound on the small stones, a steady pace that feels like a reassuring heartbeat in the darkness. He pauses near the edge of the formal rose garden, checking the heavy iron bolts on the side conservatory doors. The security of the house is his absolute responsibility, a silent contract built on trust and vigilance. As he stands there, he looks up at the vast expanse of the sky, where the bright stars are slowly beginning to dim, yielding to a deep, majestic indigo blue. Moving back inside to check the grand interior galleries, his footsteps are instantly softened by the thick carpets of the staterooms. He moves like a benevolent shadow through the dark hallways, the flame of his lantern dancing across the polished surfaces of mahogany tables and the intricate gold frames of family portraits. As he passes the great bay windows of the drawing room, he spots a small owl gliding silently across the moonlit lawn outside, its white wings catching the silver light for a brief second before vanishing into the ancient oaks. There is a profound, comforting beauty in this quiet world. While the human element of the estate rests, nature continues its peaceful nocturnal ballet entirely undisturbed. He checks the heavy wooden shutters, ensuring each iron bar is firmly in place, sealing out the damp morning air that is beginning to rise from the river valley. In this complete isolation, a deep sense of calm contentment washes over him. There is no frantic rush of daytime tasks, no strict orders to follow, and no social barriers to maintain. He is the master of this silent kingdom, the quiet protector whose steady presence ensures that the peace of the mansion remains unbroken. His rounds completed, he returns to his comfortable wooden chair near the glowing embers of the back hearth to write his nightly log in his neat, slow script. The house around him is secure, every lock is tested, and everyone within its walls is safe under his watchful care. The gentle, distant rustle of the wind through the ivy outside acts as a soothing, repetitive lullaby. He closes his logbook and rests his hands, completely enveloped by the deep, protective tranquility of his watch as the quiet world sleeps on in perfect, effortless harmony. High above the grand reception rooms in a quiet corner of the upper floor where the daylight is brightest during the afternoon, lies the seamstress's workroom. Tonight, as a silent winter frost hardens the window panes into beautiful crystalline patterns, this small room remains a warm and peaceful sanctuary. While the rest of the mansion has long since surrendered to the darkness, a single oil lamp burns with a steady golden flame on the heavy oak sewing table, casting long soft shadows against the fabric-lined walls. The air in the room is warm, clean, and carrying the comforting, subtle scents of dry cotton, starched linen, fine silk rolls, and the faint sweetness of cedar wood from the storage chests. For the estate's seamstress, these midnight hours are her most cherished time. Away from the constant daytime requests for quick mends, alterations, and fitting sessions, she can finally lose herself in the slow, rhythmic artistry of her craft. She sits comfortably in her high-backed wicker chair, her eyes focused on the delicate work resting in her lap. Tonight she is working on a beautiful evening gown of deep emerald velvet, adding the final, meticulous rows of handmade lace along the cuffs. Her silver needle moves in a gentle, repetitive cadence, piercing the fabric, pulling the silk thread taut, and sliding smoothly through the soft fibres with a faint, rhythmic whisper that sounds like a soft breath in the quiet room. Each stitch is a small, perfect act of devotion, requiring an absolute calmness of mind and hand. The steady, hypnotic glide of her scissors trimming a stray thread, and the occasional soft rustle of heavy fabric cascading over her knees are the only sounds breaking the midnight silence. She pauses for a moment, resting her hands, and looks toward the window. The silver moonlight catches the frosted glass, creating a soft, ethereal glow that illuminates the colourful spools of thread neatly arranged on the wooden shelves. In this solitary space, surrounded by the textures of beautiful fabrics, the chaotic demands of the bustling house dissolve into a profound meditative peace. She is the quiet creator of the elegance displayed by the family upstairs, transforming raw textiles into wearable art through the silent dedication of her nights. She carefully folds the unfinished gown, wrapping it in a protective sheet of soft tissue paper, and places her ivory sewing kit back into its drawer with a quiet, satisfying click. She turns down the wick of her oil lamp, leaving the room to be bathed in the serene blue moonlight. The spools of thread, the rolls of silk, and the silent sewing shears rest in the dark, completely at peace. As she prepares to leave her quiet haven and step into sleep, the slow, comforting rhythm of her needle remains in her mind, guiding her into a deep, beautiful, and completely effortless rest. Long before the first pale sliver of dawn breaks over the snow-covered roofs of the Victorian estate, the bakehouse, located in a detached stone building just across the kitchen courtyard, comes alive with a deep, comforting warmth. It is 3 o'clock in the morning, the coldest and most silent hour of the winter night. Outside, the world is completely frozen, locked in a dark, motionless sleep. But inside the thick stone walls of the bakehouse, a massive brick oven has been roaring since midnight, radiating a magnificent dry heat that fills every corner of the room. The young apprentice baker stands by a long scrubbed oak table, his forearms dusted with a fine white layer of flour. His work is the foundational heartbeat of the mansion's morning routine. By the time the household awakens, dozens of fresh, crusty loaves must be ready for both the grand breakfast parlour upstairs and the long tables of the servants' hall downstairs. He works in near-perfect silence, his movements guided by a peaceful, instinctive rhythm. He takes a large mound of raised dough, turning it over on the wooden surface and pressing his palms into it with a steady, repetitive kneading motion. The soft, rhythmic thud-thud of the dough hitting the table is a beautifully grounding, hypnotic sound that echoes softly against the low ceiling. The air in the bakehouse is thick, heavy, and incredibly rich with the deeply nostalgic, sweet aroma of fermenting yeast, warming flour, and the clean wood smoke from the birch logs burning inside the oven. This scent alone carries a profound sense of safety and abundance. As the apprentice works, he watches the yeasted loaves slowly rise under the warmth of a clean linen cloth, puffing up into soft, perfect domes. There is an absolute meditative peace in this solitary labour, far removed from the rigid rules of the upper house. Surrounded only by the elemental forces of fire, water, and flour, his mind is completely at ease, washed clean of any daytime worries. He pauses to check the oven, opening the heavy iron door with a soft metallic creak. A brilliant, cheerful amber glow spills out across the stone floor, illuminating the dancing particles of flour in the air and warming his face. He uses a long-handled wooden paddle, the peel, to gently slide the first batch of tin loaves deep into the white-hot brick chamber. The intense, crackling heat wraps around him like a protective embrace, keeping the biting winter cold completely at bay. The fire settles into a quiet, pulsing hum, and the soft, expanding sound of baking bread begins to fill the room. The young apprentice leans against the wooden flour bin, taking a deep, restorative breath of the fragrant, warm air. The mansion around him continues to sleep in absolute tranquility, completely unaware of the quiet magic happening in the dark hours. As he waits for the crusts to turn a rich, golden brown, a deep, heavy tiredness wraps around his limbs, not a burden, but a peaceful, earned relaxation. His heart is perfectly still, anchored by the comforting warmth of the hearth and the timeless, predictable alchemy of his craft, as the silent night moves gently toward the dawn. Tucked away in a secure corner of the basement, protected by a heavy iron-reinforced door, lies the silver pantry. In a grand Victorian mansion, this room was the vault for the estate's vast collection of precious metals, massive silver serving platters, intricate candelabras, delicate tea services, and heavy cutlery stamped with the family crest. Tonight, as a cool autumn mist rolls off the lawns and blankets the estate in a silent, damp embrace, a single under-footman sits alone under the soft, warm light of an oil lamp, surrounded by a world of gleaming reflections. The air inside the pantry is quiet and still, carrying the distinctive, familiar scents of linseed oil, beeswax, mineral spirits, and the dry, clean texture of soft flannel polishing cloths. While the daytime hours demand speed and constant movement, the late-night shift in the silver pantry offers a calm, almost reverent atmosphere. The young footman sits comfortably at a long baize-covered table, his hands protected by soft cotton gloves. His task requires no frantic rushing, only a steady eye, a patient hand, and absolute gentle concentration. He takes a heavy silver teapot, tarnished slightly by the smoky air of the dining room, and applies a small dab of pink polishing paste with a piece of soft chamois leather. With slow, rhythmic and circular motions, he begins to rub the surface. The faint, repetitive shh of the cloth gliding over the metal is the only sound in the room, creating a soothing, predictable cadence that slowly relaxes his mind as he works. The dull, dark tarnish gradually fades away, revealing the brilliant, mirror-like surface beneath. The small flame of his oil lamp reflects in the polished silver, casting tiny, warm amber stars that dance softly across the whitewashed stone walls as he moves the vessel. There is a profound meditative satisfaction in this solitary work, in the hierarchy of the house. His position is humble, yet tonight he is the sole caretaker of the mansion's physical brilliance. He moves from the teapot to a set of heavy brass candlesticks, cleaning away the old, hardened wax drops with a wooden scraper before buffing the metal until it glows with a deep golden warmth. In this quiet isolation, completely removed from the strict surveillance of the butler and the ringing of the house bells, his thoughts drift into a state of serene stillness, aligned perfectly with the slow, rhythmic motion of his hands. He neatly arranges the polished pieces on the felt-lined shelves, each spoon, fork, and platter placed in perfect, satisfying alignment. He steps back, looking at the silent rows of silver and brass that now glow beautifully even in the dim light. Waiting to impress the guests at tomorrow's formal luncheon, he lowers the wick of his lamp, allowing the soft, dark shadows to gently reclaim the room and its sparkling contents. As he turns the key in the heavy lock and makes his way toward the servants' stairs, his mind remains wonderfully light, completely anchored by the quiet, polished harmony of his evening's labour, while the estate around him sleeps in deep, unmoving peace. Far from the towering stone walls of the main mansion, at the very edge of the vast estate where the gravel drive meets the dark country road, sits the stone gatehouse. This tiny, ivy-covered cottage is a miniature world of its own, completely separate from the grand hierarchy and bustling corridors of the big house. Tonight, a gentle, steady spring rain falls from the midnight sky, creating a soft, rhythmic patter against the small diamond-paned windows and the thick slate roof. Inside, the lodge-keeper sits in his favourite high-backed armchair, wrapped in a blanket of absolute peace and comfort. The air inside the small cottage is beautifully warm and inviting, rich with the nostalgic scents of burning pine logs from the small brick hearth, old beeswax candles, and the spicy grounding aroma of a fresh cup of ginger tea resting on the wooden table. For the lodge-keeper, the night shift is not a burden, but a time of profound, comforting solitude. While the grand house on the hill sleeps under its own weight, he is the outermost sentry, the quiet protector who controls the entrance to this peaceful kingdom. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, the faint, distant sound of crunching gravel breaks the steady murmur of the rain. The master's evening brougham carriage is returning late from a dinner party in the neighbouring valley. The lodge-keeper rises slowly, his movements calm and unhurried. He lights his heavy brass oil lantern, casting a warm amber glow onto the damp stone path as he steps outside into the cool, rain-washed night air. The rain is soft, feeling like a gentle mist against his face, carrying the sweet, clean scent of damp earth, fresh grass and early spring blossoms from the surrounding woods. He approaches the massive wrought-iron gates, his heavy keys clicking softly in the dark. With a smooth, practised motion, he swings the heavy gates open, the iron hinges moving silently thanks to his careful maintenance. The carriage glides through, its oil lamps casting 2 long beams of golden light onto the wet driveway. The coachman gives a silent, respectful nod of thanks, and the carriage disappears into the darkness of the tree-lined avenue, its sounds fading away until only the gentle patter of the rain remains. The lodge-keeper closes the gates, locking out the rest of the world once more, sealing the estate in perfect, unbroken security. Returning to the warmth of his cottage, he hangs his lantern by the door and returns to his chair by the pulsing red embers of the fireplace. The small room is incredibly cosy, a safe haven from the vast, dark night outside. He listens to the wind whispering softly through the ancient oaks overhead and the rhythmic, hypnotic dance of rain droplets on the glass. There are no more carriages to wait for. His duty is complete, and the entire estate is safe under his quiet watch. As he takes a final sip of his warm tea and lets his eyes gently close, the serene, protective comfort of the little gatehouse wraps around his mind, lulling him into a deep, dreamless, and beautiful sleep. In the deepest hours of a humid summer night, the formal herb gardens at the eastern edge of the estate belong to a different kind of peace. Far from the stone courtyards and the sleeping servants' hall, tucked behind a thick hedge of ancient yew trees, sits the estate's apiary. Here a row of traditional wooden beehives rests under the soft silver light of a crescent moon. The heavy warm air of the summer day still hangs over the garden, thick with the intoxicating sweet fragrance of blooming lavender, white clover, and night-blooming stock. The estate's bee-master moves through the narrow grass pathways with absolute stillness, carrying a small tin smoker and a wooden tray. Working with bees during the midnight hours is a rare, delicate task reserved only for the calmest nights, when the colony is entirely at rest and clusters together inside the hives. He wears no heavy protective gear tonight, trusting completely in the absolute serenity of the hour and his own gentle, practised movements. As he approaches the first wooden hive, the scent increases beautifully, a rich, deeply comforting aroma of warm beeswax, pure golden honey, and resinous propolis. He gently lifts the outer wooden lid of the hive, his hands moving with an almost liquid slowness. Inside, thousands of honeybees are resting in perfect dense clusters along the wax combs. In the quiet of the night, the hive produces a low, continuous and deeply resonant hum, a soft, vibrating bzzz that is perfectly uniform and rhythmic. This collective murmur is incredibly soothing, sounding like a natural hypnotic lullaby vibrating directly from the heart of the earth. It fills the dark garden with a profound sense of harmony and industrious peace, washing away any lingering tension from the mind. Using a small bone tool, the bee master carefully extracts a single frame of capped honeycomb intended for the family's breakfast table in the morning. He handles the frame with immense reverence, listening to the steady, undisturbed breathing of the colony. The bees do not rise. They remain in their warm, sweet fortress, completely content in the darkness. There is a deep, ancient magic in this solitary interaction between man and nature, a quiet partnership that has existed for centuries, hidden away from the rigid structures of the grand mansion on the hill. He replaces the lid softly, securing the hive for the remaining hours of the night. He stands for a moment in the centre of the garden, breathing in the sweet honey-scented air and listening to the rhythmic symphony of the nocturnal insects and the distant gentle rustle of the summer leaves. His task is complete. The liquid gold is harvested, and the hives are safe. As he walks back along the dew-moistened path toward his cottage, the low, comforting hum of the bees lingers in his ears, a perfect, gentle rhythm that guides his thoughts into a state of absolute, effortless and sweet repose. High above the heavy iron stoves of the main kitchen, tucked into a cosy, low-ceilinged attic room, lies the herb-drying loft because the massive cooking fires below burn continuously throughout the day. The floorboards of this small room remain wonderfully, gently warm all through the night. Tonight, as a cool, crisp autumn breeze whispers through the tiles of the roof, the drying loft is a haven of absolute, fragrant comfort. The air inside is thick and deeply relaxing, infused with the concentrated warm aromas of drying peppermint leaves, bitter orange peels, crushed cloves, and rich earthy black tea leaves imported from distant lands. The young maid assigned to the tea room steps softly into the space, carrying a single beeswax candle that casts a long amber glow across rows of wide, shallow bamboo trays stacked neatly on wooden racks. Her late-night duty is a peaceful, quiet ritual, turning the drying herbs to ensure they cure evenly in the rising warmth. She moves from tray to tray with slow, mindful, deliberate movements. She slides her fingers gently through a bed of dried chamomile blossoms, lifting them and letting them cascade back down onto the woven bamboo. The sound is a beautiful, tiny whisper, a soft, dry shh that sounds exactly like a gentle autumn wind rustling through fallen leaves. This delicate, repetitive rustling is incredibly soothing, working as a natural lullaby that quietens the mind and slows the pulse. Each tray she touches releases a new, therapeutic wave of fragrance into the warm air, enveloping her in a dense blanket of natural serenity. In this solitary attic sanctuary, completely isolated from the strict hierarchies and bells of the lower floors, she finds a profound sense of calm. She is creating the custom tea blends that will comfort the household during the coming winter months, mixing dried rose ships with black tea for the family and blending wild mint with nettle for the servants' morning brew. There is no rush, no shouting, no clatter of metal. Time here is marked only by the slow, natural evaporation of moisture from the leaves and the gentle, comforting warmth radiating from the kitchen below. She finishes her rounds, ensuring every tray is perfectly arranged to catch the steady, rising heat. She sits for a moment on a low stool by the small dormer window, looking out at the silver stars shining brightly above the dark silhouette of the estate's woodlands. Her hands are dry, soft and scented with the healing oils of a dozen different plants. She turns down the candle flame, letting the deep shadows and the ambient warmth reclaim the fragrant room. As she prepares to slip away to her bed, the clean herbal peace of the drying loft settles deep into her mind, guiding her thoughts into a state of absolute, effortless and deeply restorative sleep. Deep within the quietest wing of the upper galleries, tucked away behind a heavy velvet curtain, lies the tapestry and upholstery restoration room, In a grand mansion filled with ancient heritage, the maintenance of the estate's woven treasures, centuries-old French tapestries, heavy damask window draperies, and needlepoint chair coverings is a silent, endless art. Tonight, while a bitter winter wind rattles the distant stable doors, this high-ceilinged room remains a warm, still, and profoundly peaceful sanctuary. A single large oil lamp sits on a low wooden table, its broad flame burning with a soft, steady amber glow that illuminates walls lined with giant wooden spools of natural wool, spools of spun silk, and rolled bolts of heavy brocade fabric. The air inside is comforting and dense, carrying the gentle, nostalgic scents of clean, unwashed sheep's wool, vegetable dyes, aged cedar wood boxes, and the faint, sweet wax used to coat the heavy linen threads. For the estate's restorer, the midnight hours offer a rare, beautiful stillness, a time when the grand house holds its breath and she can focus entirely on the delicate fibres of history. She sits before a massive vertical wooden frame holding a section of an ancient fading tapestry that usually hangs in the grand banquet hall. Her task tonight is incredibly slow and meticulous, repairing a frayed border where the wool has weakened over generations. With soft, practiced fingers, she selects a thread of deep madder red wool, threading it into a long bone needle. Her hands move in a gentle, repetitive loop, pushing the needle through the thick canvas backing, pulling the woolen thread taut, and weaving it smoothly through the warp threads. Each movement creates a soft, rhythmic swish sound, a beautiful textured whisper of fibre against fibre that serves as a perfect hypnotic lullaby for the mind. There is a deep meditative satisfaction in this patient labour, in this room. Surrounded by the physical weight of the past, all the hurried schedules and rigid expectations of the modern estate completely dissolve. She feels a profound connection to the silent weavers who created these masterpieces hundreds of years ago, matching their stitches one by one in the dead of night. The silver moonlight streams through the tall arched window, painting long, serene lines of cool light across the wide oak floorboards, contrasting beautifully with the warm, golden glow of her workspace. She completes her final row of reinforcement for the night, leaving the bone needle secured safely in the thick fabric. She runs her hand gently over the restored section, feeling the soft, renewed strength of the weave, completely satisfied with her quiet contribution to the house's legacy. She turns down the brass key of the oil lamp, allowing the deep, protective shadows to wrap around the spools of thread and the sleeping tapestries. As she steps out into the dark hallway toward her room, the slow, rhythmic whisper of the weaving remains in her mind, guiding her into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply comforting rest. Deep within the stone-lined basement of the west wing, right at the end of a long, unlit corridor, lies the candle room. In an era before electricity, where every grand dinner, late-night study session and dark hallway relied entirely on flickering flames, the production of light was a vital, endless craft. Tonight, as the first sharp frost of early winter settles over the estate, this small, windowless room is an incredibly warm, still, and fragrant oasis, completely insulated from the cold world above. The air inside the room is thick, heavy, and intensely comforting, saturated with the rich, sweet scent of melting amber beeswax, clean tallow, and the subtle woody aroma of drying cotton wicks. The estate's chandler sits by a low burning brick furnace, where a deep copper vat of pure liquefied wax glows like liquid gold under the soft light of a single wall sconce. His late night task is a masterclass in patience and absolute stillness, a repetitive ancient process that cannot be rushed by even a single second. He holds a long wooden rod from which a dozen braided cotton strings hang at perfect equal intervals. With a slow, fluid movement of his arms, he lowers the rod, dipping the bare strings into the warm liquid wax. He holds them there for a brief moment, then lifts them out with an equal, liquid slowness. As the cool air of the room hits the strings, a thin, translucent layer of wax instantly hardens around the cotton. He He sets the rod on a long wooden rack to cool, then takes up the next rod to repeat the process. This rhythmic, silent dipping down into the warmth, up into the stillness, creates a beautifully hypnotic, steady cadence that acts as a profound sedative for the mind. There are no sharp sounds here, only the faint musical drip-drop of stray wax falling back into the vat and the soft breathing purr of the small furnace. Moving down the line of racks, each set of candles grows fractionally thicker with every dip, slowly shaping into perfect pale pillars that will eventually illuminate the grand ballrooms and the dark servant staircases alike. In this quiet, solitary workspace, the chandler operates completely outside of the frantic daytime schedules of the mansion. He is the silent bringer of light, working in the dark hours so that others may see. He finishes his final rotation for the night, leaving the rows of fresh handmade candles to cool and harden completely into their final elegant forms. He scrapes away the soft, warm drops of wax from the wooden table, returning them to the vat, and turns down the air vent of the furnace, reducing the fire to a sleepy, deep red glow. The room settles into a warm, velvety darkness, thick with the healing scent of the hives. As he steps out and locks the heavy door, the slow, meditative rhythm of the dipping ritual stays with his spirit, untangling every remaining thought and guiding him into a state of absolute, deep and effortless sleep. Hidden away in the quiet basement of the eastern courtyard, past the heavy scullery doors, lies the estate's china and pottery restoration room. In a grand mansion where hundreds of delicate porcelain plates, hand-painted teacups, and ancient earthenware jugs are used daily, the duty of keeping them pristine falls to a single patient artisan. Tonight, as the freezing winter midnight seals the estate in a quiet, icy stillness, this long, stone-walled room remains a warm and completely undisturbed haven of order. The air inside carries a deeply grounding, rustic scent, a comforting blend of damp, rich clay, white plaster of Paris, natural pine resin glue, and the faint sweetness of beeswax used to seal old finishes. Under the soft, golden pool of light from a large brass oil lamp, the artisan sits at a wide workbench. Around him, shelves are lined with pieces of history, delicate blue and white Delftware, intricately patterned Chelsea porcelain, and heavy dark stoneware crocks. His midnight work is an exercise in absolute stillness and immense gentleness, where a single rushed movement could destroy a priceless heirloom. Tonight he is meticulously restoring a hairline fracture on a beautiful antique ceramic water pitcher. He uses a fine camel hair brush to clear away any microscopic dust from the seam, his movements incredibly light and deliberate. He then applies a tiny bead of warm, clear resin along the crack, using his thumb to gently smooth it out until the surface feels perfectly seamless once more. The only sound in the room is the soft, rhythmic shh of his fingertips, polishing the glazed ceramic, and the low, comforting hum of a small iron stove in the corner. This slow, predictable repetition works like a gentle, hypnotic lullaby, easing the mind into a state of profound relaxation. There is a beautiful, meditative quality to this solitary craft, in this quiet sanctuary, far removed from the strict social expectations and bustling movements of the upper house. Time seems to stop entirely. The artisan feels a deep connection to the original potters who shaped these vessels on their wheels decades or centuries ago. The silver moonlight reflects through the high barred window, catching the smooth, glossy glaze of the resting porcelain and casting soft, watery patterns of light across the clean stone floor. He finishes his work on the pitcher, placing it gently on a felt-lined shelf to let the resin cure completely over the next few days. He wipes his hands on a soft linen cloth and neatly organizes his small wooden tools, files, and brushes into their respective drawers with quiet satisfaction. He turns down the wick of his oil lamp, allowing the comforting deep shadows to wrap around the silent rows of beautiful pottery and porcelain as he walks back toward the warmth of his bed. The stillness of the clay and the slow, rhythmic care of his craft stay with his mind, lifting away the day's weight and guiding him into a deep, dreamless, and beautiful sleep. Adjoining the grand library, tucked behind a low cedar door, lies the estate's private bookbinding and leather restoration room. In a grand mansion with a literary collection spanning centuries, the continuous care of these fragile volumes is a quiet, ongoing devotion. Tonight, as a soft, rhythmic spring rain falls against the window panes, creating a gentle liquid murmur, this small workshop remains a warm, secure sanctuary of absolute stillness and concentration. The air in the room is heavy and comforting, filled with the rich, nostalgic scents of genuine calfskin leather, natural wheat starch paste, pressed linen cords, and the sweet aroma of warm beeswax used to coat the binding threads. Under the steady golden glow of a brass oil lamp, the artisan sits at a heavy oak workbench. Around him are the timeless tools of his trade, iron bone folders, small brass finishing wheels, and heavy wooden leaf presses. His late-night hours are a peaceful retreat, completely free from the hurried schedules of the daytime estate. Tonight his task is the structural resurrection of a rare 16th-century manuscript whose binding has split from age. He sits quietly, using a smooth, polished bone folder to gently crease the edges of newly inserted linen reinforcements along the spine. His movements are slow, fluid, and incredibly deliberate. He applies a thin, smooth layer of starch paste with a soft boar bristle brush, pressing the ancient leather cover back into place with a gentle, steady pressure of his hands. The only sounds are the soft paper-against-paper whisper of turning pages, the faint shh of the bone tool smoothing the fibres, and the steady ambient patter of the spring rain outside. This repetitive rhythmic cadence works like a profound sedative, calming the mind and slowing the pulse. There is an undeniable, meditative tranquility in this solitary craft. In this hidden room, time is measured not by the ticking of a clock, but by the slow drying of paste and the careful alignment of signatures. The restorer feels a silent kinship with the long-dead scribes and printers who first created these pages, preserving their thoughts for future generations with his own quiet hands. The cool silver moonlight filters through the rain-streaked glass, catching the intricate gold-leaf tooling on the restored spines lining the back shelves. He places the finished volume into a massive oak press, turning the heavy wooden screw with a slow, satisfying creak until the book is securely clamped for the night. He cleans his brushes, wipes his workbench with a damp cloth, and neatly aligns his tools in their velvet-lined slots. He turns down the wick of his oil lamp, allowing the soft, velvety darkness to gently reclaim the room and its sleeping treasures. As he steps out into the quiet corridor towards his bedroom, the peaceful, rhythmic spirit of the bookbindery anchors his mind, melting away the final thoughts of the day and guiding him into a deep, dreamless and beautiful sleep. Located in a quiet, secluded corner of the domestic wing, right next to the kitchen gardens, sits the still room. In a great Victorian house, this was the laboratory of comfort, a dedicated space where delicate botanical ingredients were transformed into fine soaps, soothing ointments, fragrant rosewater, and luxurious scented oils for the bedrooms upstairs. Tonight, as a refreshing summer breeze rustles through the lavender bushes outside, the still room is a quiet, incredibly aromatic sanctuary of pure, clean relaxation. The air inside the room is thick and beautifully intoxicating, carrying the comforting fresh scents of dried rose petals, essential oil of bergamot, pressed sweet almond oil, and the clean, grounded smell of pure vegetable wax. Under the soft amber glow of a single hanging oil lamp, the still room maid goes about her late-night routine with a calm, unhurried grace. These quiet hours past midnight are her favourite time. The heavy steam of the daytime distillations has cleared, leaving behind a perfectly still, fragrant atmosphere. Tonight, she is finishing a fresh batch of handmade lavender and oatmeal soap that has been curing in large wooden moulds. Sitting at the scrubbed pine workbench, she uses a taut silver wire to cut the long blocks of soap into neat, individual bars. The smooth, silent glide of the wire through the rich soap is incredibly satisfying. She takes each bar with her soft hands, gently smoothing the edges before wrapping them in crisp parchment paper. The gentle, repetitive rustle of the paper and the soft thud of the finished bars being stacked neatly into wicker baskets create a soothing, hypnotic rhythm that gently slows down the mind, melting away any remaining stress. She moves to a corner shelf where a large stoneware bowl of herbal hair pomade is cooling. Using a long wooden paddle, she stirs the mixture with a slow, fluid and circular motion. The glossy cream swirls under the golden lamplight, releasing a warm, comforting wave of rosemary and sweet orange fragrance into the air. There is no frantic rush in this solitary space. Everything moves at the natural, patient pace of nature's elements. The silver moonlight streams through the wide lattice window, illuminating the rows of glass apothecary jars filled with colourful dried petals and clear infusions, creating an ethereal, dreamlike ambience. She completes her work arranging the freshly wrapped soaps on the slatted drying shelves where they will rest for the next few weeks. She wipes down her wooden tools with a clean linen cloth and blows out her candle, letting the cool blue moonlight take full possession of the fragrant room. The air remains deeply perfumed and warm, a quiet cocoon of natural healing. As she leaves her workspace and steps into the quiet night toward her room, the clean, peaceful essence of the still room stays with her, guiding her thoughts into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply refreshing sleep. Deep within the west wing, past the long portrait gallery, the grand music room stands in absolute, velvety silence during the day. This high-ceilinged salon is filled with the lively sounds of scales, operatic arias, and the chatter of guests. But tonight, as a cool autumn fog wraps the grand estate in a silent, misty shroud, the room belongs entirely to the mansion's instrument restorer. In a house where art and music are vital to social standing, his late-night task is a solitary, almost sacred ritual of restoring harmony to the silent wood and wire. The air in the room is cool and beautifully still, holding the grounding, rich aromas of aged mahogany, spruce wood, natural violin rosin, pure linseed oil, and the soft, dry wool felt used for internal dampening. Under the solitary amber pool of light from a brass floor lamp, the grand piano sits with its heavy wooden lid raised like the wing of a giant bird. The restorer sits quietly on the velvet stool, a small leather case of tuning hammers, wedges, and ivory scrapers resting by his side. He waits until this late hour, because the true accuracy of his craft demands absolute, undisturbed silence from the rest of the house. He begins his work using a small rubber wedge to isolate a single high string. He places his tuning hammer over the iron pin, applying a microscopic fluid pressure with his hand while gently striking the ivory key. A single pure and crystal clear note ripples through the dark room, vibrating softly against the ornate plaster ceiling before gently decaying back into the stillness. He listens with intense, peaceful concentration, adjusting the pin by a fraction of a millimeter until the wave beats disappear and the note settles into a state of perfect, ringing clarity. Striking the key in a slow, repetitive cadence, sound, silence, adjustment creates an incredibly hypnotic, meditative rhythm that clears the mind of all chaotic thoughts. There is a profound, soothing peace in this nocturnal care. He moves systematically down the scale, from the bright, bell-like upper registry to the deep, resonant, and rumbling bass notes that gently vibrate the very floorboards beneath his feet. In this dark hall, surrounded by silent harps, cellos resting in their velvet cases, and sheet music stacked neatly on walnut stands, he is the quiet architect of the house's voice. The silver moonlight cuts through the tall arched windows, casting long, peaceful shadows across the polished parquet floor and illuminating the fine dust motes dancing in the warm lamplight. He strikes a final full chord, a rich, warm harmonic blend that resonates through the entire structure of the piano, proving that every string is now in perfect, synchronized alignment. He leaves the chord to fade away completely until the room returns to its deep, beautiful silence. He packs his tuning pins into their felt slots, gently lowers the heavy mahogany lid, and slides the key into the brass lock with a satisfying click. As he turns down the lamp and slips out into the quiet corridor, the pure, perfect frequency of the music room echoes in his mind, guiding his spirit into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply restorative rest. Down a quiet, stone-paved ramp leading toward the northern courtyard, tucked well away from the heat of the kitchens, lies the crystal glasswork and chandelier restoration room. In a grand Victorian estate, illuminated by thousands of dancing flames, the brilliance of the house depended entirely on the flawless clarity of its glass. From the massive, cascading crystal chandeliers in the ballroom to the delicate, hand-engraved wine goblets used at state dinners. Tonight, as a biting winter frost locks the gardens outside in a silent, icy grip, this long workshop remains a still, peaceful world of frozen light and absolute calm. The air inside the room is cool, clean and crisp, carrying the grounding mineral scents of wet sandstone, fine pumice polishing powder, pure water and the faint sweet wax used to mount delicate pieces. Under the soft golden pool of light from an oil lamp, the artisan sits before a foot-powered stone grinding wheel. Shelves lined with green baize surround him, holding brilliant treasures, heavy crystal decanters, faceted prisms from disassembled chandeliers, and delicate bohemian glass bowls. His late-night hours are a quiet retreat, a time when the house is still and the vibrations of daytime activity cannot disturb his ultra-precise touch. Tonight, his task is the delicate repair of a priceless, diamond-cut crystal goblet that suffered a microscopic chip along its base during a winter gala. He drips a small amount of water onto the fine grit sandstone wheel and gently presses the crystal against it, using his foot to turn the wheel with a slow, rhythmic and effortless cadence. The soft liquid whir-whir of the spinning stone, combined with the gentle hiss of water smoothing the glass, is incredibly soothing, creating a steady, hypnotic murmur that rings softly through the room. With absolute patience and fluid movements of his fingers, he shapes the glass until the floor completely disappears, leaving the surface as smooth as river ice. There is a profound meditative tranquility in this solitary craft, in this hidden vault, surrounded by thousands of facets that catch and splinter the golden lamplight into tiny dancing rainbows. The worries of the outside world dissolve into nothingness. The silver moonlight streams through the frosted window panes, striking the rows of resting crystal and creating an ethereal winter wonderland of soft, shimmering reflections across the whitewashed brick walls. He moves from the grinding wheel to a workbench, using a piece of soft velvet cloth to buff a handful of crystal drops from the ballroom chandelier, his hands moving in a slow, comforting rhythm. He carefully hangs the restored crystal prisms back onto their iron display frame, listening to the tiny musical tink-tink they make as they brush against each other, a sound as delicate as falling icicles. He empties the water tray, wipes down his stone wheel, and covers his tools with a soft canvas cloth with quiet satisfaction. He lowers the wick of his lamp, allowing the deep, velvety shadows to wrap around the sparkling room and its silent, sleeping treasures. As he steps out into the quiet hallway toward his bedroom, the pure, brilliant stillness of the Crystal Palace stays with his mind, lifting away the day's weight and guiding his thoughts into a state of absolute, effortless and deeply restorative sleep. Deep within the central tower of the mansion, down a narrow flight of stone steps, lies the clockkeeper's workshop. In an estate of this grand scale, where dozens of antique timepieces from massive grandfather clocks in the Great Hall to delicate French mantel clocks in the boudoirs regulate the lives of everyone within, keeping time is a silent, sacred science. Tonight, as a gentle, cool autumn mist rolls over the roof tiles, this small room is a warm, secure haven of perfect unbroken order. The air inside is incredibly comforting and still carrying the distinct nostalgic scents of refined mineral oil, polished brass, aged walnut wood casings, and old parchment paper logs. Under the soft golden light of a large desk lamp, the clockmaker sits comfortably on his wooden stool. His late-night shift is a chosen sanctuary. He waits until the entire household is deeply asleep, because the true regulation of time requires a silence so absolute that he can hear the microscopic friction of a single copper tooth. Tonight, he is servicing a beautiful 17th century bracket clock. Using a pair of fine silver tweezers, he carefully adjusts a tiny brass balance wheel, his movements incredibly fluid and precise. The room around him is filled with a unique, comforting symphony, the soft, collective and layered tick-tock, tick-tock of dozens of clocks hanging on the walls. This sound is not sharp or disruptive. It is a steady, organic heartbeat, a perfectly uniform and repetitive cadence that instantly blankets the mind in a deep sense of security. The rhythmic swinging of brass pendulums catches the amber lamplight, casting long, lazy shadows that dance across the room in a slow, hypnotic waltz. There is a profound, meditative tranquility in this solitary workspace. In a world that changes rapidly, the clockmaker works with the unchanging laws of physics and mechanics, untangling the chaos of the day into neat, predictable intervals. He uses a fine camel hair brush to apply a single microscopic drop of oil to the escape wheel, watching the mechanism instantly smooth its movement. The silver moonlight cuts through the high window, illuminating the brass gears on his desk like tiny metallic stars and creating an atmosphere of ancient, timeless calm. He gently closes the glass door of the bracket clock and gives the heavy brass pendulum a soft, deliberate push with his fingertip. The clock responds with a deep, confident and rhythmic beat, perfectly aligning itself with the rest of its mechanical companions. The artisan wipes his tools, stores his magnifying lenses in their velvet-lined boxes, and turns down the wick of his lamp, allowing the soft, dark shadows to reclaim the room. As he steps out into the quiet corridor, the slow, hypnotic ticking of the clocks stays with his spirit, dissolving every remaining thought and guiding him into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply peaceful sleep. Just across the snow-dusted stone courtyard at the far end of the stable wing lies the estate's saddle and leather curation room. While the main house sleeps under a blanket of winter silence, this room remains a warm, rustic, and incredibly inviting haven. Outside, a crisp midnight frost turns the stable roofs silver, but inside, a small cast-iron stove crackles gently with birch logs, radiating a deep, dry heat that keeps the cold completely at bay. The air in the room is heavy and wonderfully grounding, filled with the rich, comforting aromas of genuine tanned leather, neatsfoot oil, pure yellow beeswax, and the clean, woody scent of cedar storage chests. For the estate's saddler, these quiet hours after midnight are a peaceful ritual. Sitting on a sturdy wooden bench under the soft golden glow of a hanging oil lamp, he is surrounded by rows of polished riding boots, intricate carriage harnesses, and heavy leather saddles resting on wooden blocks. His movements are calm, deliberate, and entirely unhurried. Tonight he is conditioning a beautifully crafted side saddle used for morning rides. He takes a soft, damp sea sponge, dips it into a tin of warm saddle soap, and begins to work it into the thick leather using slow, circular motions. The faint, repetitive shh of the sponge gliding over the smooth surface is the only sound breaking the silence, creating a deeply soothing, hypnotic rhythm. As he rubs the rich cream into the grain, the leather softens, shifting from a dull matte to a deep, lustrous amber glow that beautifully reflects the warm lamplight. There is a profound, meditative peace in this solitary labour, far from the busy demands of the coachman and the rigid hierarchy of the upper estate. The saddler finds a quiet contentment in the preservation of his craft. From the stables next door, the occasional faint sound of a horse shifting softly in its straw, or a low gentle exhale ripples through the wooden partitions. These distant, natural sounds only deepen the immense sense of safety and rustic comfort enveloping the room. He finishes buffing the saddle with a clean flannel cloth, running his hand over the supple, protected leather with quiet satisfaction. He neatly lines up his brushes, hangs his polishing cloths to dry, and closes his tins of wax with a soft metallic click. He turns down the brass valve of his oil lamp, allowing the warm velvety shadows to wrap around the sleeping harnesses and the glowing stove. As he steps out into the crisp night air to head toward his cottage, the steady, rhythmic warmth of his craft settles deep into his mind, melting away the final thoughts of the day and guiding him into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply comforting rest. Tucked deep inside the basement of the North Gallery, right behind the rows of silent linen stores, lies the cabinetry and marquetry restoration room. In a grand mansion adorned with precious heirlooms, the preservation of fine furniture, intricate French commodes, mother-of-pearl inlaid writing desks, and heavy walnut wardrobes requires an artisan's endless patient devotion. Tonight, as a silent winter blizzard covers the estate's sprawling lawns in a thick, unmoving layer of white, this subterranean studio remains a warm, secure, and completely peaceful haven. The air inside is thick, dry, and wonderfully grounding, rich with the nostalgic scents of exotic rosewood, dark ebony shavings, pure tung oil, natural shellac, and the sweet warmth of melted beeswax. Under the solitary golden pool of light from a heavy brass oil lamp, the restorer sits on a low stool before a beautiful antique jewellery casket. The piece is covered in delicate marquetry, tiny hand-cut pieces of coloured wood, brass, and iridescent mother-of-pearl shaped into flowers and vines. His midnight work is an exercise in immense gentleness and absolute focus, where time slows down to a gentle crawl. Tonight he is reviving the lustre of the delicate mother-of-pearl inlays that have grown dull over the decades. He dips a small pad of soft wool cloth into a mixture of fine rubbing oil and beeswax, then places it against the inlaid surface. With slow, rhythmic and circular motions, he begins to buff the wood and shell. The faint, repetitive swish-swish of the cloth moving over the smooth surface is the only sound in the room, creating a deeply soothing, hypnotic cadence that acts as a natural sedative for the mind. Under his steady hand, the mother-of-pearl slowly awakens, catching the amber lamplight and flashing with soft watery hues of pink, green and silver like frozen moonlight. There is a profound meditative tranquillity in this solitary craft, surrounded by silent centuries-old chests, rows of fine steel chisels and jars of crystalline resins. The artisan is completely insulated from the strict, demanding schedules of the family upstairs. He moves with a peaceful purpose, matching the careful patience of the master craftsman who created these pieces generations ago. The stillness of the subterranean room feels vast and protective, wrapping around him like a heavy winter blanket. He finishes buffing the entire surface of the casket, running his bare fingertips over the smooth, flawless marquetry with quiet satisfaction. He seals his jars of oils, wipes his wooden workbench with a soft rag, and neatly aligns his polishing pads in their tin boxes. He turns down the wick of his oil lamp, allowing the deep velvety shadows to wrap around the glowing wood grains and the sleeping treasures. As he steps out into the quiet corridor to head to his bed, the slow rhythmic warmth of his craft settles deep into his spirit, clearing his mind of all remaining thoughts and guiding him into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply restorative sleep. Located at the very end of the domestic wing, just above the soft bubbling waters of the courtyard well, lies the fine linen and lace-pressing room. In an estate where state dinners require long tables draped in flawless Belgian lace and heavy damask linens, the care of these delicate fabrics is an art of immense patience. Tonight, as a gentle spring breeze carries the scent of damp earth and fresh bluebells through the high lattice windows, this long, white-tiled room is a peaceful, warm sanctuary of absolute cleanliness and order. The air inside is thick, comforting and clean, filled with the gentle steam of hot water, the grounding scent of linen starch, and the soothing aroma of dried lavender bags tucked between the wooden shelves, under the soft, golden light of an oil lamp. The laundress stands at a wide, flannel-padded table. Around her tall wicker baskets hold rivers of cream and white fabrics waiting for her gentle touch. Her midnight hours are completely undisturbed, free from the heavy rushing dampness of the daytime wash-house below. Tonight she is smoothing a magnificent tablecloth woven with intricate lace borders. She takes a heavy brass box iron, filled inside with glowing, silent charcoal embers that radiate a steady, deep warmth. Holding the smooth wooden handle, she presses the iron onto the damp linen, moving her arm in long, slow and fluid strokes. A soft whispering hiss, shh, rises from the fabric as the steam escapes, releasing a fresh wave of lavender fragrance into the room. This steady, repetitive gliding back and forth across the endless white paths of the cloth creates an incredibly hypnotic meditative rhythm that gently anchors the mind and slows the pulse. There is a beautiful, serene tranquility in this quiet labour, in this solitary room, far removed from the busy corridors of the grand house. Time is marked only by the gradual disappearance of creases and the perfect smoothing of ancient threads. She uses her fingers to carefully align the delicate lace borders, ensuring every tiny flower and vine patterned in the weave is perfectly displayed. The silver moonlight streams through the window, catching the glossy, pristine surface of the finished linens, stacked neatly on the cedarwood shelves, making them glow like sheets of fresh snow. She places her heavy iron down on its iron stand with a soft clink. Satisfied that the grand table for tomorrow's feast will be absolutely flawless, she folds the heavy damask cloth with a slow, practised grace, smoothing the final edges before resting it atop the wicker stack. She covers the pile with a clean canvas sheet, closes the vents on her iron to let the embers sleep, and lowers the wick of her lamp. As she steps out into the quiet hallway to find her own bed, the warm, clean whisper of the linen room remains with her, untangling her thoughts and guiding her into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply peaceful rest. Deep within the vaulted stone cellars beneath the west terrace, where the foundations of the mansion meet the bedrock of the earth, lies the mosaic and pietra-dura workshop. In an estate decorated with Italianate grandeur, the maintenance of precious stone tables, inlaid marble trays, and lapis lazuli jewel boxes demands an artisan of absolute stillness. Tonight, as a cool midnight breeze sweeps through the subterranean arches, carrying the faint, sweet scent of blooming jasmine from the gardens above, this workshop remains a warm, silent fortress of perfect concentration. The air inside is beautifully grounding, rich with the mineral scents of wet slate, powdered pumice, pure pine resin glue, and the subtle sweetness of natural beeswax polish. Under the soft golden light of a large low-hanging oil lamp, the artisan sits before an antique walnut tabletop. The surface is an intricate puzzle of hard stones, smooth jasper, pale chalcedony, brilliant green malachite, and cream-coloured marble, shaped into a vivid pattern of exotic birds and fruit. His late-night task is an exercise in profound patience and delicate touch, completely removed from the rapid pace of the household above. Tonight he is reviving the deep, liquid shine of a lapis lazuli border that has lost its lustre over the generations. He coats a small block of dense wool felt with a mixture of fine polishing oil and beeswax, placing it firmly against the stone inlay. With slow, rhythmic and continuous circular motions, he begins to buff the surface. The faint, steady hiss of the felt moving over the perfectly level stone is the only sound in the workspace, creating an incredibly soothing, hypnotic rhythm that relaxes the mind. Under his steady hand, the dark blue stone slowly awakens, reflecting the amber lamplight like a deep night sky filled with golden stars. There is an immense meditative tranquility in this solitary craft. Working with materials that have existed for millions of years, the artisan feels a peaceful detachment from the fleeting worries of the day. Time here is not measured by minutes, but by the gradual cooling of resins and the slow emergence of natural light from the heart of the stone. The silver moonlight filters through a high ground-level window, cutting across the stone floorboards and catching the edges of rows of raw mineral slabs stacked against the whitewashed walls. He finishes polishing the entire border, running his bare fingertips across the seam where the stone meets the marble to ensure it is completely, seamlessly smooth. He covers his jars of polishing powders, cleans his felt pads, and wipes his workbench down with a soft linen cloth with quiet satisfaction. He turns down the brass key of his oil lamp, allowing the soft, dark shadows to reclaim the sleeping stones and the glistening table. As he steps out into the quiet corridor toward his room, the slow, rhythmic murmur of the stone polishing stays with his mind, lifting away the day's weight and lulling him into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply restorative sleep. Tucked into a warm alcove just behind the massive hearths of the great kitchen lies the estate's copper and brass store. In a grand mansion where hundreds of copper jelly moulds, heavy brass pots, and ornate fireplace fenders are used daily, keeping the metal from tarnishing is a quiet, never-ending labour. Tonight, as a cool autumn rain patters gently against the high brick chimneys, this low-ceilinged room is a remarkably cosy, warm and comforting haven, absorbing the lingering heat from the great ovens next door. The air inside is thick and deeply grounding, carrying the clean, sharp scent of fresh lemon juice and crushed sea salt used for cleaning, mixed with the warm, rich aroma of linseed oil and beeswax polish. Under the soft golden glow of a single oil lamp, the copper polisher sits on a low wooden bench. Around him, shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, holding rows of heavy kitchen copperware that catch the lamplight like low-burning embers. His midnight hour is a peaceful escape, a quiet time when the frantic clatter of cooking has long ceased, and he can focus on his craft in absolute stillness. Tonight he is restoring the deep, mirror-like shine to a large, antique copper preserving pan. He applies a small amount of fine polishing paste to a thick piece of wool flannel and places his hand against the smooth metal. Moving his arm in slow, wide and rhythmic circular strokes, he begins to buff the surface. The soft, repetitive swish-swish of the flannel against the heavy copper is the only sound in the room, creating an incredibly soothing, hypnotic cadence that gently relaxes the mind. Under his patient touch, the dull, dark tarnish gradually vanishes, replaced by a deep, warm and radiant glow that beautifully reflects the amber flame of his lamp. There is a profound meditative tranquility in this solitary task. In this quiet room, surrounded by the physical warmth of the metal and the steady rhythm of his own movements, all the hurried energy of the daytime kitchen completely dissolves. He moves seamlessly from the pan to a pair of ornate brass candlesticks, working with a gentle, deliberate slowness that cannot be rushed. The silver moonlight cuts through the small ventilation window, casting long, peaceful shadows across the clean flagstone floor and playing softly on the brilliant, polished surfaces around him. He finishes buffing the final piece, running his thumb over the clean, flawless metal with a sense of quiet satisfaction. He seals his polished tins, folds his flannel cloths neatly, and lines up the gleaming pots on their wooden shelves, ready for the morning chefs. He turns down the wick of his oil lamp, letting the deep velvety shadows wrap around the warm metal and the quiet room. As he steps out into the dark hallway to walk toward his bed, the slow rhythmic whisper of the polishing stays with his thoughts, lifting away the day's weight and guiding him into a state of absolute, effortless and deeply restorative sleep. Hidden away at the sun-warmed apex of the south wing, just beneath the gentle slope of the roof eaves, lies the passementerie and trimming workshop, In a grand mansion where luxury is defined by the smallest details, the creation of intricate silk tassels, golden fringes and braided cords for the state drawing-room curtains is a highly specialized quiet art. Tonight, as a warm late-spring midnight wraps the sprawling estate in a fragrant, soft stillness, this small room remains an incredibly cozy and undisturbed haven of creativity. The air inside is comforting and still, holding the delicate, clean scents of raw mulberry silk, natural starchy dressing, old pine storage drawers, and the faint sweet wax used to stiffen the ends of the guiding threads. Under the steady amber glow of a single porcelain oil lamp, the artisan sits before a small, tabletop wooden loom and a collection of smooth wooden bobbins. Rows of shelves stretch into the shadows, packed with vibrant spools of silk thread, crimson, emerald, deep indigo, and fine spooled wires of genuine gold and silver. Her late-night hours are a peaceful sanctuary, a quiet time when she can manipulate the weightless threads with absolute focus and ease. Tonight she is weaving an ornate, jade-green silk tassel fringe to border a set of velvet cushions for the grand library. She holds the smooth, heavy pearwood bobbins in her hands, gently lifting and crossing them over one another in a slow, fluid, and practiced pattern. The tiny, musical click-clack of the wooden bobbins meeting, combined with the soft, liquid rustle of the silk strands slipping through her fingers, creates an incredibly soothing rhythmic murmur. This steady, repetitive cadence works like a gentle lullaby, slowing down the pulse and effortlessly quietening the mind. There is a deep, meditative tranquility in this delicate labor, in this solitary workspace, far removed from the busy daytime schedules and the heavy silver trays of the butler's pantry below. Time slows down completely. The artisan feels a quiet sense of harmony, watching the chaotic mass of individual threads organize into a perfectly uniform, beautiful trim under her steady hands. The silver moonlight streams through the open dormer window, introducing a gentle breeze that carries the scent of blossoming apple trees from the orchards below, causing the hanging skeins of silk to sway lazily in the dark. She weaves the final inch of fringe for the night, tying off the structural cords with a series of slow, secure knots. She neatly winds her remaining silk threads back onto their spools and aligns her wooden bobbins in their soft, felt-lined drawers with quiet satisfaction. She turns down the brass key of her lamp, allowing the deep, velvety shadows to wrap around the shimmering silk and the quiet loom. As she leaves the room and walks softly toward her bedroom, the peaceful, rhythmic click-clack of the bobbins remains in her thoughts, melting away the final cares of the day and guiding her into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply restorative sleep. At the edge of the lower terraces, tucked into a stone arcade that opens directly onto the walled gardens, lies the Riverstone and Pebble Mosaic Workshop. In a grand country estate where the garden pathways are designed as works of art, intricate swirling walkways made of thousands of hand-sorted stones. The maintenance of these pathways is a patient, seasonal craft. Tonight, as a cool autumn mist rolls off the river and blankets the grounds in a silent, white shroud, this sheltered workspace remains a warm, grounding, and deeply peaceful sanctuary. The air inside is crisp and earthy, carrying the raw, comforting scents of damp river sand, wet limestone, dark alluvial soil, and the faint, sweet warmth of natural beeswax used to coat the finished ornamental stones. Under the soft amber glow of a heavy iron oil lamp, the artisan sits on a low canvas stool before a large wooden shallow tray. Around him, wicker baskets are sorted by stone size and colour, smooth slate-grey ovals, milky quartz rounds, and glossy dark river pebbles. His late-night hours offer a rare, beautiful stillness, where the only movement is the slow drift of fog outside the stone arches. Tonight he is pre-assembling a decorative rosette panel meant to repair a worn section of the conservatory path. He selects a smooth, oval black pebble from a basket, feeling its cool, water-worn texture with his thumb, and gently presses it into a bed of fine, damp sand, aligning it perfectly beside a row of pale quartz pieces. The soft, metallic clink-tink of the pebbles resting against each other, combined with the gentle, rhythmic scraping of his small wooden trowel smoothing the sand bedding, creates an incredibly hypnotic, serene cadence. This slow, predictable touch of earth and stone acts as a natural sedative, easing the mind into a state of profound relaxation. There is a beautiful, deeply meditative tranquility in this ancient labour, in this quiet alcove, far removed from the strict social expectations and bustling movements of the main mansion. Time seems to slow down to match the pace of the earth. The artisan feels a serene connection to the timeless forces of the river that shaped these stones over thousands of years. The silver moonlight filters through the mist and under the stone arches, casting a cool, ethereal glow over the finished portions of the mosaic, making the wet stones glisten like embedded jewels on the dark floor. He places his final pebble for the night, ensuring its smooth curve sits at the exact depth as its neighbours, completely satisfied with the uniform balance of the design. He wipes his hands on a rough linen cloth, covers his sand trays with a damp canvas sheet to keep them pliable, and neatly restacks his baskets of stones. He turns down the wick of his iron lamp, allowing the deep, protective shadows to blend with the autumn fog wrapping around the arcade. As he walks back toward the warmth of his quarters, the grounding stillness of the stones and the slow, rhythmic care of his craft stay with his spirit, lifting away the day's weight and guiding him into a deep, dreamless and beautiful sleep. Deep within the quietest corner of the West Gallery, just a few steps away from the master's study, lies the small workshop of the seal carver and inkstone restorer. In an era when every important document, invitation and legal deed from the estate was sealed in heavy wax and signed with custom ground inks, the care of these personal symbols was a highly respected, quiet craft. Tonight, as a silent winter frost hardens over the window panes, creating intricate crystalline patterns, this small wood-panelled room is a perfectly warm, still and beautifully grounded retreat. The air inside is comforting and dense, filled with the rich, sophisticated aromas of dry pine soot ink sticks, natural slate stone dust, pure tung oil, and the sweet warmth of solid beeswax blocks used to coat the carvings. Under the soft, concentrated glow of a low brass desk lamp, the artisan sits on a cushioned stool. Around him, small lacquer trays hold precious materials, smooth nephrite jade, dark Shoshan stones, and heavy, beautifully carved Dwan inkstones. His midnight shift is a deeply peaceful ritual, chosen specifically because the extreme precision of his hand requires an environment free from the slightest vibration. Tonight he is restoring a magnificent antique black slate inkstone that has been used by the family for generations. He holds a fine water-wetted sandstone file and slowly, with an incredibly light and fluid touch, rubs the shallow basin of the stone to smooth away decades of microscopic ink crust. The only sound in the room is the soft, rhythmic hiss, hiss of the wet file moving over the stone, a repetitive, watery whisper that creates an instantly hypnotic and calming ambience. This steady, unhurried cadence gently coaxes the mind to let go of its heavy daytime thoughts, slowing the pulse to a restful rhythm. There is a profound meditative tranquility in this solitary sanctuary, surrounded by rows of miniature steel chisels, fine camel-hair dusters, and jars of red cinnabar sealing paste. The artisan feels completely detached from the frantic pace of the mansion above. He moves from the inkstone to a small soapstone seal, using a tiny velvet cloth dipped in oil to gently polish its carved base, revealing the beautiful natural veins hidden deep within the mineral. The silver moonlight cuts through the high arched window, casting a cool, silent glow over the polished mahogany shelves and reflecting softly off the smooth surfaces of the resting stones. He finishes his fine adjustments, running his bare thumb across the pristine satiny texture of the restored slate with quiet satisfaction. He wipes his small tools with a piece of silk cloth, seals his bottles of polishing oils, and closes his velvet tool cases with a soft metallic click. He turns down the brass key of his desk lamp, allowing the warm, velvety darkness to gently wrap around the silent minerals and the cozy room. As he steps out into the quiet hallway to head to his bed, the grounding stillness of the ancient stones remains with his spirit, lifting away the final cares of the day and guiding him into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply restorative sleep. High up in the quietest attic space of the south wing, directly beneath the heavy cedar rafters, lies the estate's herbal drawing room and potpourri workshop. In a grand mansion where every drawing room, guest suite, and linen closet is kept smelling fresh and luxurious year-round, the continuous creation of sweet-scented floral mixtures is a gentle, ongoing devotion. Tonight, as a cool early autumn breeze sighs softly through the clay roof tiles, this secluded room remains a warm, intensely fragrant, and completely peaceful sanctuary. The air inside is thick, comforting, and deeply aromatic, a rich, nostalgic blend of dried crimson rose petals, faded lavender buds, dried orange peels, cinnamon bark, and the grounding earthiness of powdered orris root used to fix the scents. Under the soft amber glow of a small glass oil lamp, the maid sits at a wide, shallow oak mixing trough. Around her, from the dark wooden beams above, hundreds of bundled herbs and dried flowers hang upside down, casting long, lazy shadows that sway ever so gently in the still environment. Her late-night hours are a tranquil escape, an unhurried time when she can work with the fragile petals without any distraction. Tonight, she is blending a signature winter fragrance mixture for the grand salon. She reaches into a deep wicker basket, takes a large handful of crisp, dried lavender and rose blossoms, and lets them cascade slowly through her fingers into the wooden trough. The faint, whispering crackle shoof of the dried petals rubbing together is incredibly soft and soothing, creating a gentle, organic rhythm that immediately quietens the mind. She then takes a small crystal dropper, adds a few drops of pure bergamot and clove oil into the mix, and uses a wide wooden paddle to turn the flowers with a slow, circular and fluid motion. This steady, repetitive movement releases a fresh, warm wave of deep floral perfume into the room, working like a natural sedative to slow down the pulse. There is an undeniable meditative peace in this solitary craft, in this hidden attic world far removed from the strict social rules and heavy silver trays of the bustling lower floors. Time seems to stand completely still. The maid feels a quiet contentment, watching the colourful petals swirl and blend under the golden lamplight. The silver moonlight streams through the small dormer window, illuminating the fine, fragrant dust motes dancing in the air and reflecting softly off the rows of large stoneware aging jars lined up against the wall. She finishes her blending for the night, covering the wooden trough with a clean linen cloth to let the oils deeply infuse the botanicals over the coming weeks. She wipes her hands, neatly packs away her oil droppers, and sweeps the workbench with a soft brush with quiet satisfaction. She turns down the brass wick of her lamp, allowing the comforting velvety darkness to wrap around the sweet-scented rafters and the sleeping flowers. As she walks down the quiet wooden stairs toward her room, the clean, peaceful essence of the drawing room stays with her spirit, melting away the final thoughts of the day and guiding her into a state of absolute, effortless, and deeply restorative sleep. The long, deep night begins to gently soften as the first microscopic whispers of dawn brush against the eastern horizon of the great estate. Outside, the heavy midnight frost, the autumn fog, and the cool summer breezes that once swept through the gardens now melt into a single, perfectly still pool of pale lavender and amber light. The sprawling mansion with all its high towers, stone arches and deep wings sits in a state of absolute, serene and harmonious equilibrium. Down in the dark workshops, the silent cellars, the aromatic attic spaces, and the quiet galleries, the rhythmic sounds of the night's devotion have completely faded into peace. The bookbinder's bone folder rests beside the sleeping parchment. The clockmaker's pendulums swing in a uniform, silent waltz. The tapestry restorer's needle is safely tucked away, and the fresh herbal scent of the still room has settled deep into the old oak floors. Every tool is wiped clean, every oil lamp is extinguished, and every piece of precious craftsmanship is blanketed in the protective soft shadows of a house that has been beautifully, meticulously cared for. Upstairs in the cosy, quiet bedrooms, the artisans, weavers, curators, and keepers are now drifting in the deepest, most restorative stage of their slumber. Their hands, which moved with such patient, fluid grace throughout the dark hours, rest completely relaxed upon the cool sheets. The heavy, chaotic thoughts of the waking world have been entirely unravelled and smoothed out by the steady, hypnotic cadences of their solitary arts, the rhythmic swish of polishing felt, the gentle click of wooden bobbins, and the slow, watery murmur of sharpening stones. The entire estate breathes in a slow, uniform, and peaceful rhythm. Completely suspended in this golden moment between night and day, there is no rush, no sudden noise, and no burden left to carry. Everything is in its perfect, rightful place. The world outside remains distant and quiet, leaving this sanctuary entirely dedicated to the profound healing power of rest. As the final shadows gently dissolve into the warm morning light, a beautiful, eternal sense of safety and completion wraps around the mansion, guiding every remaining thought into a state of absolute, effortless, and infinitely peaceful sleep. Sleepy History with Benedict is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes. The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation. Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study. By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep. Thank you for your understanding and support.